Hi, good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission. The date is March 28th at 6:45 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. In accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 40C, the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission shall hold a public hearing on Monday, March 28th, 2022 at 6:45 p.m. regarding the proposal to create the first Universalist Church local historic district. The purpose of this hearing is to allow for public comment regarding the creation of this district. Written comments should be submitted to historic@somervillemad.gov prior to the hearing date. Pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, this hearing of the Historic Preservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation. An audio recording of these proceedings will be available upon request to historic@somervillemad.gov. And before we proceed, we'll do some quick introductions of ourselves to the public. With Vice Chair Kelly, I'd like to start.
Hi, I'm Robin Kelly. I'm the Vice Chair of the Commission, and I'm the Realtor representative, as well as a historic homeowner in Union Square.
Mr. Bingham.
I'm Alan Bingham. I'm in Ward 6. I'm a historic homeowner and former chair of the Commission.
Mr. Bauer.
I'm Dick Bauer. I live in the Spring Hill neighborhood. I'm an attorney and I was trained as a city planner, and I'm also a former chair of the commission.
Albie. Ryan.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Ryan Falvey. I'm a resident of Ward 2.
And Mr. Chagnon.
I'm DJ Chagnon. I'm a resident of Ward 5 and a landscape architectural member of the commission.
And I'm Eric Parks. I'm the chair of the commission. I'm a resident of Ward 3, a historic homeowner and an architect. And would staff please, Ms. Chekowicz?
Hello, I'm Wendy Chekowicz, a preservation planner with planning, preservation, and zoning.
And Ms. White?
And I'm Sarah White. I'm a senior planner with the Division of Planning, Preservation, and Zoning.
For proceeding, we have George Proikis, who's the executive director of the OSPCD, who'd like to make a quick comment before he has to check out. So I'll turn it over to George.
Thank you and good evening. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So I just have a few minutes today that I can be on to speak to you all, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. White, who's going to give you a little bit more of background. I just wanted to speak with now 68 attendees waiting on this particular meeting. This particular item, the 125 Highland Ave Church, has generated a lot more interest than usual when we do single building districts, which, as you all know on the commission, we've done quite a few of through the years. The purpose of today's meeting is to make sure all voices are heard. This is a statutory step to have a hearing before it goes to the city council, who makes the final decision. But I think also within the realm of the way we operate in Somerville, in the concept of the type of democratic process that we undertake here to make decisions, I think it's very important for the commission to hear all the voices, as there have been many voices on all sides of this particular issue, and see where you think the council should land, give them that advice as well as an understanding of what happens at this hearing so that they can make an informed choice on this. We on the staff looked at this, the commission had an interest in it, the staff had an interest in it, leading the staff to submit a study report to have the Mass Historical Commission start in on this process, which leads to this public hearing, mainly because we think this building is worthy of the conversation. That doesn't necessarily mean that we all have determined that means it is worthy of designation, but that it is not often that we have someone coming forward looking to demolish a building that is already listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And although the National Register does not guarantee protection, it does cause one to make pause and say, is this a building that we should be making sure is protected at the local level? It was part of the groups that we looked at with the commission from 2005 to 2011. You may recall, if you were here then, that we grouped together a bunch of parcels that we wanted to ask the council about back then. We made it through the first 4 of those 10 groups and then didn't follow the rest of the process through. This was, I think, in the 9th or 10th group, so we never got to it. But it has been on the radar as a possibility to be a district. But it obviously came up as we went through the process of demo review that this is a building that is worthy of consideration, not necessarily worthy of designation, but worthy of the conversation about whether or not it should be designated. And I know some people have brought up some very substantially both factual and emotional arguments about this building, and I want the opportunity for people to use their comments in addition to the letters they've already sent us to be heard on this. So as this building has started through the demo review process, which is a separate process from whether or not it should be designated, one of the steps in that demo review process is to ask the question of whether or not there's a way to save the building. So certainly we on the staff looked at and considered that possibility. We've had conversations with one of the nonprofit developers who does affordable housing, who felt that it was possible to do a historic and affordable housing tax credit project on a building like this. But obviously they don't have the building under agreement. They haven't been into the middle of it. We have another developer who has it under agreement. We need to sort all of those issues out and consider the possibility of whether designation is something that saves this building or that makes it difficult for this building to go forward and do anything. You know, obviously, if we can save it and make a tax credit project go forward, that's something that might be worthy of consideration in a different way than if it just gets stuck. I think you got to consider all of the comments today about what the possibilities are with the circumstances of designation. At the same time, I think there is a moment here where we have to acknowledge that the public hearing process is the best and most significant ways to bring forward different views in the community, get that recommendation, and bring it to the place where it will eventually lie, which is with the elected officials of the city council, who are the ones who are able to make a decision as to whether something should or shouldn't go in a historic district. And in the past, they have made differing decisions on different sites through the city. I've seen them go different ways in them based upon the historic history of the building, the circumstances surrounding its future development, and the opportunities that can be available, and how important that building is to the community, and kind of what its past, present, and future can tell us. So I look forward to having you all have the chance to hear from Ms. White and then from the public tonight on all of the possibilities of whether or not this building should be designated. I want to stress that we here on the staff will continue to do our best to try to answer questions, guide, provide facts, make sure that factual information is in front of you, and give you the best opportunity to make a decision. But we, at the end of the day, aren't making this decision. We're trying to advise you, to advise the city council on what to do here. And we look forward to being as supportive of you all as we can be in trying to get to the answer to this particular question. So I thank you all and wish you the best. And Ms. White can fill in the details on how the hearing will work, as well as some background on the building in particular. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Okay, Ms. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll just give me 1 second, I am going to share my screen. Thank you, Wendy. All right, this always takes a hot minute. There we go. Can you all see my screen where it says Somerville Historic Preservation Commission?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so the reason I wanted to go through some really basic information here at the start is there's always a lot of questions around in the community about who is this commission, what do they do, why are they here, why are they involved, etc. So who is the HPC? So this group of people, not Wendy and I, we're staff. This group of people before you, they are a volunteer body who applied to be members of this commission. They were vetted by the city council and they were approved by the city council. We are always looking for more members, so we certainly welcome applications. So one is the local historic district designated process roughly. So roughly speaking, once you've decided that you want to pursue designation, potential designation for a building, we write and submit a preliminary study report, and that has the basic history of the building, architectural descriptions, etc. We're required to talk about the differences between a local historic district and a National Register district, etc. It's a very prescribed type of document that the Massachusetts Historic Commission staff wants municipalities to write. So they're set up in a very certain way, and very specific items are addressed in very specific ways in these reports. The absolute must is to hold a public hearing, and that is tonight. That is the public hearing that is required by law, which is MGL Chapter 40C. It requires the Historic Preservation Commission or a study committee, if there's no commission within a particular municipality, to hold a public hearing such as this. After this, depending on how the commission votes tonight as to whether or not they want to move this forward to the city council or not, if they do, then in the future there will be a vote by the city council. That date would be pending. We don't know yet the outcome of how the commission is going to decide tonight, and that will also be up to the city council's schedule. So what is the Massachusetts Historical Commission's role in this process? There have been a lot of questions about that, and a lot of slightly off information about it. So the Massachusetts Historical Commission has a purely advisory role in this entire process. They receive a brief presentation at their meetings by their own staff about buildings that are up for local historic district consideration, and they take a vote. What I think is very important to note, because I have seen information to the contrary floating around, and I want to make sure that that's corrected, their review is advisory only. So they could say, we advise that you establish a local historic district, and oh, by the way, we also advise that you include these several other buildings within that district. Well, a municipality can say, that's nice, thank you for your information and thank you for your advisory review, but we are not going to follow that advice because we don't want to include all of those other buildings in this district. Similarly, if they vote against recommending the designation of a local historic district, like they did in this case, we can say, thank you very much. We take your comments, just as we take all public comments, and we will either proceed with recommending to the council that this be designated as a district or not. The MHC vote, I would also argue review, is a bit problematic because the Massachusetts Historical Commission has no criteria at all that they are supposed to follow when they make their vote and advisory recommendation. And I have met with Massachusetts Historical Commission staff, and this has been confirmed by them. So their vote is, I don't know how to explain it, however they feel that day or what they hear from the public, or if they hear nothing from the public, etc. But and having listened to the recording and been at the entire meeting, there was no real criteria that there were no real reasons that they gave for why they voted this way. Now, the commission itself, the Massachusetts Historical Commission, it has been contended that they provided a thorough review of the preliminary study report, when in fact, as confirmed by the Massachusetts Historical Commission staff, they never received the preliminary study report. And they also did not receive the letter that the buyer's attorney sent to them the evening before the meeting. Apparently, the Massachusetts Historical Commission never receives the preliminary study reports that are submitted, only their staff. So the commission was really basing their vote on what was before them that day in a roughly 10-15 minute period. So pursuing a local historic district during the demolition delay, there have been some questions about that, and that this is a common practice throughout the Commonwealth. Many municipalities, I would say most municipalities that actually pursue designations have pursued some during the demolition delay process, right? These are two separate statutes. One is a state statute, one is a local ordinance, and that's the demo delay ordinance, and they operate separately from each other. Cambridge, for example, having spoken to them, they routinely tend to hold meetings in the last month or so of a demo delay period to see if their city wants to pursue LHD designation or not. And then I have received some concerns from the Gilman Square Neighborhood Association about notification concerns. I think that one of their concerns was why they had not been notified about this meeting. And there was some mention of an agreement with the Gilman Square Neighborhood Association between them and OSPCD, which is a division in which we all operate. And the agreement is about really the Gilman Square neighborhood plan, of which this is not part and is not considered part of Gilman Square. And the Gilman Square neighborhood plan really focuses on the area around the station and around the streets immediately around that area. So that is why the Gilman Square Neighborhood Association has not been particularly reached out to as an entity involved in this. This has been something that involves really the property owners and the buyers, as you will hear from their attorneys, who I believe we're going to give the floor to speak to this evening. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman? First we have Ms. Sherman, and then we have Ms. Haywood. That's not correct, and they'll have 4 minutes each.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, would you go over the cadence of the rest of the meeting?
Sure.
Just so people know what's going to go on.
Yeah, so we'll shortly be opening this up for public comment. And just for those of you who sent letters in, we were receiving them up to 4:30. We've received, I think, some 65 or so letters. If you sent one in after 4:30, your letter was not necessarily received and reviewed by all of us, so you're better off speaking tonight if you want to get your point across. There is a chat feature of this program. We're not using it, we're not reviewing it, we're not interfacing with it, so there'd be no value in using that as a way of communicating with us. Everybody will have 2 minutes to speak, except as Ms. White just mentioned, the attorney for the owner and the buyer of the property. We've been given them by special request a 4-minute session of time each, followed by any city councilors who want to speak, and then we'll open it up for the public. We're interested in hearing from individuals, so we're not going to allow people to cede time to others. It's you say your piece and move on. And that is pretty much everything to say about that. So with that, I would like to formally open up the floor for public comment. And I think staff was going to go a little bit more about the protocol for making your presence known and all that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like Ms. Chekowitz to go over that protocol, if you wouldn't mind, Wendy.
Sure. Anyone who wishes to speak tonight during public comment, what you'll be doing is raising your hand using the raise hand function. You will each be given, with the exception as noted, the 2 attorneys that will be speaking at the beginning. Each of you will have 2 minutes to make your comment. There will be a timer up on the screen for you to see how much time you have left. At the end of 2 minutes, you will have a few seconds to finish your sentence. Otherwise, staff will move on to the next person. If there are multiple people using the same computer for tonight's meeting, let's say husband and wife, friends are using all the same computer, at the beginning of being unmuted and called on, you will need to make clear that there are multiple people that would like to speak in your party and how many people are going to be speaking. That way we know to stay on you for each person's 2 minutes. And that is it.
Okay, thank you. Unless there's anybody else wants to contribute anything, let's start now with public comment.
With Ms. Sherman, yes? Attorney Sherman?
Yes, exactly.
There you go. I believe you are unmuted on both ends, Cindy.
I am unmuted. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. Good evening. I appreciate all the commissioners taking the time to hear everybody tonight. I expect that this may be a long evening. My name is Cynthia Sherman, and I represent King Solomon's Lodge and the Highland Masonic Temple Association, the owners of 125 Highland Avenue. The members have asked me to make it clear to the commission that they vehemently oppose the establishment of a limited historic district at the site. and that they are in favor of the plans to redevelop the property to include much needed housing, especially inclusionary units, not to mention additional property tax revenue and good paying jobs for the city. The establishment of an LHD, and I'm going to use that to conserve on my time, will deprive the lodge not only of a substantial asset and their only asset, and that's the equity that they have established in the property during the 33 years that they've owned it. A LHD will place a burdensome restriction on the property, making it nearly impossible for the lodge to sell the property to anybody else. It was mentioned earlier that there may be somebody out there that's interested in doing a project for tax credits. Well, that's news to me and news to my clients, and I'm surprised that there's someone out there negotiating the potential disposition of my client's property without involving my client in those conversations. We are under contract to sell the property. We're contractually bound to see that transaction through, if at all possible. The establishment of an LHD would amount to a taking by the city of Somerville. And if that were to happen, my clients intend to pursue all legal remedies that are available to them. The HPC's basis for establishing the LHD appears to be both the historical and the architectural significance of the building. And I submit to the commission that there's neither. And I'm going to cede to that because I think there are a number of other people that are going to talk about the issues with the architect and are going to talk about the prior owner's involvement. But there's nothing about the building, either architecturally or historically, that's worth preserving. In a city where land for development is at a premium, the opportunity to develop much needed housing, especially affordable housing, should take priority over preserving this particular property. If this property was of such importance, clearly back in 2005 and 2011, when properties were being reviewed, it wouldn't have been at the bottom of the list. A vote by the HPC to adopt the preliminary study report and to recommend that the City Council establish an LHD is contrary to the provisions of the city's demolition permit, and it's inconsistent with the spirit and intent of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40C. The commission, while Sarah talked about the fact that other cities often do this late in the process, Somerville isn't other cities. Okay, the ordinance does not contemplate using an LHD to get around the demolition of a property that's preferably preserved. The ordinance provides for that. My client, as well as all of the members of the team, Wayside and Tony Barros, have complied with everything that they're supposed to do. The demolition delay is about to run, and at the 11th hour, 7 months after it was first brought to the commission's attention and 5 months before the delay was set to expire, the commission started the process for an LHD. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. There's rules set up. My clients followed the rules. At the end of the year, they should be entitled to the demolition permit. The rules have been changed.
Your 4 minutes are up.
Finish the sentence?
Yes.
All right, I thought I could finish the sentence that I was in the middle of speaking. The rules have been changed in the middle of the game. And by the change in rules, it's adding additional hurdles to my client that they're not going to be able to overcome, making their property essentially worthless. And I'll end there because I've used my 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
One second, Mr. Chairman. I am looking.
While you were doing that, just a reminder that the clock will need to be set for a different time increment.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Chekowitz, it's Kathleen Heyer. Kathleen, I'm sorry if I say your name incorrectly, who is the attorney for the buyer. And so that'll be reset at 4, but then after Kathleen, then it'll need to be reset to 2.
Thank you.
There we go. Ms. Tyre, you're unmuted now.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathleen Heyer. I'm an attorney at Pierce Atwood here in Boston, and I represent Waypoint Companies EP LLC, which is under contract to purchase the property at 125 Highland Avenue from the Highland Masonic Temple Association. My client and I are in complete agreement with the position taken by Attorney Sherman on behalf of King Solomon's Lodge and the association. I did submit a letter to the commission in advance of tonight's hearing. I hope everyone's had a chance to read it, but I'm not going to waste your time by simply rereading my letter into the record. Just very briefly, as I did put in my letter, our position is that the adoption of this LHD runs contrary to the language and intent of the Demolition Review Ordinance. Waypoint has complied with all the relevant provisions of Somerville's bylaws. It has invested a substantial amount of time, money, and effort into its plan to redevelop the property in reliance upon the fair and equitable application of those bylaws. This commission should not be seeking to avoid compliance with its own ordinance. Waypoint is entitled to rely upon this commission's decision with respect to its demolition permit application, is entitled to issuance of a demolition permit when the 12-month delay expires, and intends to take all necessary action to protect its interests. I would like to take a moment to remind the commission of how we arrived at this point. In February 2021, consistent with the Demolition Review Ordinance and with the support of the Lodge, my client submitted a demolition application with respect to the 125 Highland Avenue property. This commission held 2 hearings in March and April, and on April 26, 2021, made a final determination that the building should be preferably preserved, thereby initiating a 12-month demolition delay. Between May and November, my client worked with staff in an attempt to reach a memorandum of understanding that would permit my client to move forward with its proposed redevelopment of the property, which I know would provide much needed affordable housing, while still addressing the city's desire to preserve the history of the property. In November, with no notice to my client or the property owner, the HPC began the process of designating the site as a single property local historic district. That process largely took place without input from the property owner, my client, or the community. The preliminary study report submitted to Mass Historical Commission had little mention of the opposition from the owner and the prospective purchaser, and essentially no mention of the community opposition thereto. At their hearing, after opposition was voiced by both my client and members of the Lodge, the Mass Historical Commission voted in opposition to the LHD. We're here tonight for this commission to consider the same preliminary study report. I know you're going to hear from a number of people who are opposed to the LHD on the grounds that the building lacks architectural and historical significance. Indeed, the historical significance of the building runs contrary to Somerville's efforts to be an inclusive and diverse city. This commission has the authority to emphasize its commitment to listening to the community and upholding those the principles that the city espouses, while continuing to follow Somerville's duly adopted regulations, including the Demolition Review Ordinance. We respectfully ask this commission to vote against recommending creation of this LHD. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I think you were going to move next to the ward councillor.
Yes, this, Mr.
Chairman?
Yes, oh no, I thought he was about to speak. Yes, I was going to move to Mr. Winkampen, our Ward 3 councillor, I believe, is going to speak.
Yes, correct.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Can you just clarify if I have a 2-minute time limit? I just want to make sure that I match my remarks to the time.
Out of deference to your position in the city, we tend to let you go past any city councillors.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll try to keep this brief. So first of all, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here in very strong support for establishing the local historic district at 125 Highland. For your record, my name is Ben Winkampen. I'm the city councillor for the district where this property is. And as all of you know, has been stated, the demolition delay period, and first of all, let me thank all of you very much for voting to enact that a year ago, it is about to run out. It is clear as day that if we do not act, this historic structure will be demolished as soon as that period runs out. I believe that's 1 month from yesterday. I think that would be a really unfortunate and a short-sighted outcome. I think we would be losing a piece of local history and missing a really important opportunity for the possibility of a great adaptive reuse project. I'll just say, as the ward counselor, I'll add for your record, I've received many of the same emails you did. I did a tally this morning. Of the many dozens of emails I received, 81% of those from neighbors, residents were in strong support of protecting this property. So take that for what it's worth. As Director Proakis mentioned, I think there are two reasons why there is really any question about the designation, two themes that have come up a lot. The first has to do with the building owners, the folks who have owned this property for almost 4 decades, repeatedly stating that a historic designation would make the property undevelopable and that it would be a vacant blight on the neighborhood for years to come. And the second reason is that the developer has submitted an argument that the building's architect is, in his view, a racist, and that protecting this building would be a monument to that racism. I think that these are both worthy of consideration. I want to share my thoughts, that, informed by the many emails and conversations I've had. On the first issue, I categorically reject the argument that creating a local historic district would mean a property can never be rehabilitated and redeveloped. As you all know, there are local historic districts across the city, across the state. These properties are regularly rehabilitated, expanded upon, improved for many different uses. As I have stated multiple times, my preference as a city councilor would be for this developer to partner with an affordable housing developer on an adaptive reuse. This would unlock multiple sources of local and state funding. It would also unlock Somerville's Affordable Housing Overlay District, which we recently passed specifically to encourage to facilitate this sort of project. So to put it mildly, I do not find this talking point compelling. But the second reason that so many of us are paying attention to this is, again, because of the developer's argument about the racism of the architect. So before I just briefly kind of get to the substance of that argument, I want to address what is for me a much more fundamental concern I have. So I've heard this situation with 125 Highland likened to movements that we have seen across the country to remove Confederate monuments, to tear down statues, to rename institutions, to look at the way we use history and historical preservation. I hope it goes without saying I am completely in support of those movements. My issue with likening 125 Highland with that broader movement is really this. The people across the country who have been pushing to remove racist monuments are not real estate developers seeking to build apartment buildings on those locations. And in my opinion, what gives those movements legitimacy is that they're coming from a groundswell of a social movement. If there had been a longstanding grassroots movement pushing to demolish this building, that's possible we'd be in a different conversation. But in this case, I think there's a very clear, straightforward financial conflict of interest. I don't think it can be avoided. So I'm hesitant to engage on the substance, but I do want to share some thoughts because I think it's a serious enough issue that it deserves a response. And I want to be clear, I could imagine a hypothetical situation where this sort of argument was so compelling, so clear, that I could be convinced, even if the people making the argument had a conflict of interest. I am not someone who believes we can ignore the views of architects, historical figures, artists. I generally think it's appropriate to look at those issues. But I have to say, I am not a historian, and I look forward to hearing from everyone tonight and all of you. I had never heard of Ralph Adams Cram before this. I have read the documents that were submitted by the applicant, and I'm not here to defend the architect, but I think if we're going to look at those issues, I must say the materials in my reading are not compelling, and I don't quite see the argument fully. I want to be clear for members of the public who are interested in this. I'm talking about 2 documents submitted by the developer, which is an undergraduate history paper and a 500-page PhD dissertation. I have done my best to read those documents. I'll admit that they are very full of jargon. I actually sent an email to the author of the PhD dissertation a few days ago. I haven't received a response yet. As far as I can tell, the undergraduate paper is about a different architect named McBee. It includes a short section on Cram, and it states that he believed English Gothic architecture was superior to German, French, and Italian Gothic architecture. I've heard from others that this view was part of an anti-Catholic immigrant stance. That may certainly be true. I don't know. That's not documented in this paper. The other document is like a book-length, Derrida-inspired deconstructionist analysis of Cram's architectural theories. I personally could not find any reference in that to his political view on race as I understand the word. It quotes Cram talking about race in the context of English rather than German, for example. Again, I'm not defending him. I don't know enough to be in a position to defend him. I'm saying that we've had a year for this argument to be made, and I haven't seen it. So in closing, and I thank you for the time to speak, if we don't designate this property as a historic district, it will be demolished very soon. And we would be irreversibly losing a piece of Somerville history. And I don't think we have to do that. I have done my best to engage with the arguments against a historic district. I personally have not been convinced by them. And I very much hope that you will protect this property. And thank you all for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, this is Ms. White speaking. I see that one of our other counselors has his hand up, and that's Counselor Jake Wilson. Did you want to defer to other counselors at this time?
Yes, other counselors should speak now as well, so bring them on.
Sarah, what was the name?
Jake Wilson, and it looks like he's been unmuted.
Okay, perfect.
Counselor Wilson, yes, is that you?
It's me, yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Jake Wilson. I'm one of your city councilors at large. I spent time meeting with the owners, the developer, and community members on both sides of this one. I'll save my personal views on the matter for if and when the city council were to take up the matter. But I want to make sure everyone knows I've read the comments emailed to the city council, and I'm here tonight primarily to listen. What I'll be listening for is where people are at on this. Despite studying art and architecture a bit as an undergrad, I don't particularly care much about the architect or the architectural significance of a building in our city when deciding whether it's historic. What really speaks to me personally is the views of the community. If the neighbors of a building view it as historically important to the fabric of their neighborhood, I'm inclined to agree with them and view it as historic. So that's what I'll be listening for. And yeah, thanks for doing this. Thanks for recognizing me and giving me a chance to speak here.
Thank you. Ms. White, are there any other counselors?
I'm looking through, and while they might be here, there, Counselor Ewan Campen, did you have your hand up again? Or was that left over? No, I think that's left over. Okay. I am just looking through to see if any other counselors have their hands up. And I don't see that any do at this point. No other counselors, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, thank you. Then I think the appropriate next step is just to invite general members of the public to speak in whatever order they've set up.
Could I ask Ms. Chekowitz, would you mind just briefly going over those rules again?
Yes, so any members of the public wishing to speak tonight, please raise your hand using the raise hand function. You'll be given 2 minutes to make your comment. At 2 minutes, you will have a few seconds to finish your sentence up. Otherwise, staff will move on to the next person. If there are multiple people using the same computer for tonight's meeting, and more than one of you intend to speak, please let staff know when we first unmute you and how many individuals at that household plan on speaking. And that way we know not to move on when the first person is done with their comment. All right, so any members of the public wishing to speak, please raise your hand. Mr. Chairman, I am going through.
Okay.
I preemptively am going to apologize to every member of the public for potentially butchering your names. All right, Benjamin Echevarria, you are unmuted. You will need to unmute on your side as well.
Okay, thank you. Hi.
Oh, so sorry to interrupt, Ben. 1 second. Rebecca, can you start over? Every member of the public will need to give their name and their address as well. Thank you.
Yep. Hi, my name is Bennett Chavarria. I live at 15 Westwood Road, which is about 2 blocks away from the site. To me, I think there's an interesting thing here. We talk about history, and when we talk about history, we're literally talking about the word his. And in this case, what we're talking a lot about is white male-centric history. And as a person of color, I'm Latino. I actually used to run the Welcome Project here in the city. And as a Latino man, I'm always bombarded with white culture and white history and sentiments of racism. There's a host of things that we have to live with in the city. Yes, I get Governor, Winthrop, and I know where his plantation was literally where the projects are now. I understand Paul Revere. These are events that occurred. People lived here, and in history, there are significant events. Having a building where an architect who was racist, that nothing happened on this property, and we're calling it history, is what the question here really comes down to. And for me, the problem that I've always had in these arguments is that when it comes to issues of race, it's great that we have so many supposed progressive white people who want to determine what's racist and what's not racist. And we as people of color, when we stand up, we're not listened to. We're told, oh, let's look at it this way, let's look at it that way, instead of actually just listening to us. And today, what I'm hoping for is that you're just going to say, let's get rid of this building, not to do this piece, and let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to continue going through the raised hands. Carlinsregaud, you are unmuted. You are only muted on yourself, so you'll need to unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening, Council. My name is Carlinsregaud. I live on 28 Montrose Street, and I am against Highland Ave becoming a local historic district, designating it that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, as a reminder, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Christine Carlino, you are unmuted. You just need to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Ms. Carlino, we can hear you.
Can't hear me. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Christine Carlino, 378 Medford Street, Ward 3 resident. I'm the board president of the Gilman Square Neighborhood Association, whose catchment area does encompass this property. And I will say to Ms. White, we are a neighborhood and a community. We are not limited to a train station. I worked for Cram and Ferguson Architects, consequently, from 2011 to 2012. And as a licensed architect, I'm here to provide some professional input on this matter. When you look at the political and social environment of the time, which is critical to this discussion, you see that Cram's architecture occurred during a time just after the Reconstruction era. While backlash from this era was at the forefront of writings and political dialogue, Cram himself has stated in his writings that these writings had influenced him deeply. America was continuing its search for an American architecture. So I had architects like Frank Lloyd Wright working to find a new architectural language. You had Cram leading up a dialogue about dominating the landscape with Gothic and Romanesque revival in an effort to align white Anglo-Saxon Protestants as supreme leaders in these realms of society. In his publishing of Why We Do Not Behave Like Human Beings, Cram reveals that it's because we're not all human beings. We have evolved not as one species, but sprung from several, claiming that only the exemplary, citing examples such as Robert E. Lee as true humans, but the rest as barbaric and unevolved Neolithic animalistic creatures. The rules of historic preservation do not allow for the Commission to take this context into account when deciding on whether a building warrants preservation. This is short-sighted as architecture exists in and is experienced by people based on this context. This entire process is a prime example of systemic bias. The city referred the decision to the Mass Historic Commission, who heard testimony from the city and from Mr. Barros. In contrast, their charter and their efforts to ensure diverse representation on their commission have ensured a diversity of perspective in their decision. They're not required to ignore political or social context, and they voted a majority vote against designating this building as a local historic district, 8-2.
Ms. Carlino, you are
For that
out of
reason, for the
2
racist
minutes.
history represented in this building, I believe that Somerville Historic Preservation Commission should uphold the vote of the MHC and vote no on designating this property an LHD. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Christopher Kenny. Christopher, you are unmuted.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Christopher Kenny. I'm the president of the Highland Masonic Temple Association. And I'm going to bring the points out that the structure is in very poor and rapidly deteriorating condition. It will cost tens of millions of dollars to restore the building. And as mentioned, the financial burden of maintaining this building is beyond our means. It will financially cripple King Solomon's Lodge, effectively destroying the 239-year-old institution. An LHD would not result in saving a deteriorating church, but would effectively create a blight on our city, as King Solomon's Lodge will no longer have the means to restore and maintain the building. Also, it's worth noting that the building is unused and unwanted by any organization in Somerville. King Solomon's Lodge will no longer regularly meet in this building. None of the churches, community organizations, the Somerville Corporation, nor the city of Somerville itself will have expressed any interest in acquiring or even using this property. Finally, this organization has been in the city for over 240 years and will continue to function in the city if able to sell this building and continue to purchase another building in the city and contribute to the livelihood of Somerville as an organization. Finally, we would like to continue to function as a community member of this organization and participate in helping the city to succeed in growth in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, as a reminder, anyone who'd like to speak, please raise your hand. All right, Eileen Schofield, you are unmuted. If you would like to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and speak. Eileen Schofield, you are unmuted on our side, so you just need to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. My name is Eileen Schofield and I live at 9 Knowlton Street, and I've been in Somerville since 2010, and my husband is a lifelong resident of Somerville. I have been involved in the history of Somerville, a lot of events for historic lectures and things like that, and also the Millcrow Cemetery and Prospect Hill. One of the reasons I love Somerville is the historic sites that are available to people. The thought of destruction of another historic building to build another condominium building block, just losing the character of our historic city and the pride that comes with that. I have started a petition online to see if we can get residents to support saving this building, even to extend the demolition delay as well. Currently, I have a very low number of signatures on the online signature petition, but we have a growing number of pages for the hard copy, which I will send in too. I would just like to state that it is a shame to lose another building in Somerville. You know, it's a beautiful building. It could be a beautiful building. I've not had the opportunity to walk in or around it, but I have seen photographs of the inside, and the artwork is, you know, the glass stained windows are amazing. The building itself, the structure. I do realize it does need some work, and I think that the city could find some other use for this as affordable housing or some other use instead of just demolishing another building and putting up another brick building in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Ellie Botshon. You are unmuted. You are just muted on your side.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 My name is Ellie Botchin. I live at 28 J Street, Somerville. And I would like to say that I'm listening to the people of color in today's conversation, both the developer and the members of the community who spoke before me. I would like to add my vote to theirs and hope their voices are heard as they called not to designate this building as LDH. The other thing I'd like to say is people are wanting to save it without a plan for how to do that. And I think that will be a very costly and potentially futile experience. Thank you.
All right. Next up is George Sneelock. George, you are unmuted on our side, so you just need to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm a resident of Somerville. I live at 81 School Street, Apartment 1, just around the corner of the site. Just wanted to say quickly that I oppose a historic district for this site, primarily because I feel like we have a housing crisis, and I support Tony Barros's plan to build 40 homes on this property. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is Jason Behrens. Jason, you are unmuted on our side.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Behrens. I grew up on Thurston Street, spent many, many years in Somerville. I first met Tony Barros back around 10 years ago. He and his family enrolled his daughter in a little cooperative preschool. And since then, I've known Tony to be a very community-oriented guy. You know, after being pushed out of East Somerville by developers himself, I was intrigued to hear that Tony had begun his own journey in real estate development. Tony is part of a new social movement. I see new developers emerging who are or could be developing more meaningful partnerships with the community. You know, growing up, I walked by that building thousands of times, maybe more, and the building has a place in my childhood memories, but I'm also interested in the future, and I'm excited by the prospects of, you know, constructing a new history, you know, together. And I believe Tony Barros is a different kind of developer, someone who can and does work closely with the community. I think Somerville needs developers like Tony going forward, and I hope the site is not designated a historic district. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder to people to please give your address. I don't think we've got that for the last two people.
James Miller, you have been unmuted. You are still muted on your side, though.
Hi, I think I am unmuted now. I just have this is James Miller from 86R Marshall Street, down the hill. I think hearing all the voices is really important, and I heard one of the counselors mention that this is a building that has a rich history in Somerville, and I just want to hear more about that, because at the moment I am certainly on a vote no against a historic district, but I think, you know, we should hear from everybody who believes this is a historic district, so that we could have some clarity around that. Thanks.
Jason Mackey, you have been unmuted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for your time, first of all, and I appreciate the unenviable position you guys are in at the moment. So again, thank you for your attention to this matter. And by way of introduction, my name is Jason Mackey. I'm a member of King Solomon's Lodge and live just down the street from 125 Highland Avenue at 203 Highland Avenue. I'm also the diversity officer for Ward 5 and a proud POC member of the LGBT community. And I'd like to begin by giving some background on Freemasonry. So Freemasonry is the world's oldest and largest fraternity. It is comprised of men of good character from every country, religion, race, age, income, sexual orientation, education, and opinion. I say this to give context as to who I am as a Freemason, and because since publishing my op-ed that many of you may have read, I have been the target of several rather bizarre and racially charged attacks. An individual who will remain nameless went as far as to call me, a gay black man, a white supremacist. Of course, anyone who knows me knows how absurd that is, and I'll leave it at that. Anyway, to reiterate my point from the op-ed, this property is not worth preserving, period. It is architecturally and historically insignificant. It is designed by an actual white supremacist, a fact that some may find or be hesitant to engage in and find disconcerting, but is of clear concern to people of color who I've spoken to, including myself. And ultimately, if an LHD is established, nothing will happen to this site for years to come. No jobs, no affordable housing, no nothing. And as we've said before, this building is unused and unwanted by anyone in Somerville. King Solomon's Lodge no longer currently meets there regularly. We will have to continue meeting there if this is established as an LHD. None of the churches we've approached, the community organizations, no one. I recognize I'm running out of time here. Again, the ruling for the Massachusetts Historic Commission agrees that the building is not worth preserving. I hope you agree with them as well and recommend that this building not be preserved by the establishment of a local historic district. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
John Kinzierski, you are unmuted on our end if you would like to unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is John Kinzierski. I am a resident at 369 Medford Street. I am a homeowner in Somerville, and I have lived here for almost 20 years now. I'm also a former officer at King Solomon's Lodge. And I want to thank you for your time. And I'd like to touch on a point that several people have mentioned. It is our lodge's involvement with the community. We received our formal charter several days after the Treaty of Paris, in which the United States was officially established. We existed for quite a while in different setups before that. We have been involved with the community for more than 230 plus years. We are actively involved with organizations such as local food banks. We are active with the Red Cross to provide blood. Masons are one of the largest blood suppliers in the state, as well as other projects we have worked with. And the establishment of the historical district is a direct threat to us. We have our assets are tied up in this building. And I feel it's very unfair that while we have followed all the rules for the past 2 years and gone through numerous hoops, jumped through numerous hoops for this, that this is now being put on us. And this is a direct financial threat to us. It limits our options for the future and severely curtails what we were able to do within the city of Somerville and the greater area around here in terms of our charity work. So I am vehemently against the establishment of this, and I feel it is a very unfair to be springing on us at such a late state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jonathan Buck, you are unmuted on our end. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Good evening to everyone involved. I live at 89 Heath Street. I've lived in Somerville for the past 20 years and purchased my home 14 years ago, right down the street from the Star Market building that still has not been redeveloped, that has no local historic district and has cost 15 years worth of possible tax revenue and affordable housing for our community, which, listening to NPR on the way home, heard the staggering figure of 3 million homes that the country is currently short, heard about all of the delays, 6 months for a developer to get a door, lumber prices, oil prices, everything that goes into building more housing for what this community most desperately needs is at a premium right now. And we have a developer that's from Somerville that's willing to put in the time, the millions of dollars to provide an extra 40 units of housing, an additional, I believe it's 8 to 10 affordable homes. and it would really help the entire city. I think it's one of those classic situations where we shouldn't let the idea of perfection stand in the way of progress. Again, the Massachusetts Historic District voted 8-2 against. I've yet to hear anyone cite any significant reason or event that happened at this now abandoned building, essentially. I've heard many people of color in the community who I support, speak up against the white supremacist architect who designed the building, and I just feel it's a waste of everyone's time for us even to be belaboring this point. I understand the need for it. I understood coming into this and expected far more people to be speaking in support of it, particularly when the ward councilman spoke about the large majority of community members that emailed him. I don't see how that's possible unless all of those people haven't showed up this evening. Let's tear down this monument to white supremacy. Let's get some affordable housing, and let's move Somerville forward today, not 15 years from now. Vehemently against, obviously.
Joshua Stevens, you're unmuted. I just would like you to answer one question really briefly. I see your name twice in the list. Are you signed in under two different devices, or is there someone else that is also using a device you're registered on?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I'm just on one device. I may be on my phone, but yeah, there's just one person speaking tonight.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you everyone for hearing us out tonight. On behalf of King Solomon's Lodge, and as Jake Wilson said, this is a community decision. So they did ask us to get a feel for the neighborhood. So we knocked on doors. We pulled in the butter list 300 feet within the property, and we knocked, and we gave them a flyer and outlined our position on the property. And with that, we received dozens of signatures. And so I'm going to read those off to you. We have Sarah Woolman, 64 Oxford Street. Don Austin, 26 Adams Street. Barbara Guilfoyle, 32 Central Street. We have Stephen Hausman, 43 Bentley Street. Elaine Lopes, she's 2 Madison Street. We have Amy Paccio, 54 Oxford Street. Emily Hano, 13 Troll Street. Gabriel Romano, 528 Revere Street. Mikhail Crawford, 48 Oxford Street. Sophia Barbosa, 6 Oxford Street. Thomas Albangelina, 12 Oxford Street. Alina Laveria, 12 Oxford Street. We have Dean Mahoney, 131 Highland Ave. We have Jonathan Rose, 105 Central Street. It goes on and on and on. And the petition they signed states, we do not support the creation of the First Universalist Church local historic district. We support the demolition of 125 Highland Ave to continue to support the King Solomon's Lodge Masons, a nonprofit organization that has been operating in Solomon for 100+ years, and create 32 units of housing and 8 affordable units. Jobs for local residents, minorities, and women at 125 Highland Ave. There are dozens of signatures here. I can go on and on and on. We are in the nation's largest housing crisis, and we are focusing on such a smaller issue when the far more important issue is providing houses, both affordable and market rate, so people can stay in Somerville. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to remind people to please give their addresses as they're speaking.
Sophia Perez, you are unmuted. If you would like to speak, you're only muted on your side.
Yes, hi. My name is Sofia Perez, and I live at 57 Madison Street. I moved here in 1996, so I've had some chance to observe the life around 125 Highland Avenue. Let me just say that I'm here to support the designation of the building for historical preservation. And first of all, I support it because it's a landmark. The almost more than 2.5 decades that I've lived here, it has been a center for people of color in the neighborhood. I don't know how many people here know. I suspect maybe not that many, but it's strange because they should be very aware of it, that the last group that was there for a number of years was the Centro Apostólico y Profético de Gracia, which is a Latino religious group that has actually been there for quite some time and has had to leave because of the fact that this building was sold as it was. I think the building is of both architectural and historical value. The complex of the two churches across from each other reflects Somerville's religious diversity rather than anything else. And I'd just like to add that if you go to Fram's Wikipedia page, what I would think would be something people would look at, you will see that he was actually outspoken against anti-Catholic bigotry in the early 20th century. Just to say that I also teach a class that has to do with all of these things at Boston University.
Thank you.
Ms.
Kevin
Chekowitz, are you there?
Yes,
Oh.
sorry, I was going through the list. Kevin Dickinson, you are unmuted on our side. You will need to unmute yourself.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Dickinson. I live at 30 Richdale Avenue. I've been a resident of Somerville since 2008. I've served on as a commissioner for the City of Somerville's Veterans Monuments and Memorials Commission, and currently on the City of Somerville's Police Chief Search Committee. I'm also a member and officer of King Solomon's Lodge and has been a member since 2010. People before me have spoken quite eloquently regarding the building. And what I would like to know is what is the historical significance of the building? Architects have said the building has no significant value. The architect itself has a dubious history of racism. Uh, just and the history of Somerville is also the history of King Solomon's Lodge, an organization that has served Somerville for centuries now, saying that it's older than the city of Somerville itself. Uh, what I'm surprised at is the fact that no one is speaking about what historic significance does the building actually play. Uh, the last speaker spoke to the 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 Latino church that was there. There has been two Latino churches there, but if you go inside that building right now, you cannot breathe. The church left not because the building was sold. The church left because it is unhealthy. You cannot breathe because of the mold throughout the church, throughout the building. In order to save that building, you have to gut it down to its walls, which is actually demolishing the building itself. So yes, I'm not in favor of creating a local historical district at that site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Liam Seward, you are unmuted on our side.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, thank you. My name is Liam Seward. I live at 59 Boston Street in Somerville, about 4 blocks away from 125 Highland Ave. I'm a homeowner and a member of King Solomon's Lodge, and I want to thank the chair and all the members of the committee for allowing me to speak. I want to thank Ms. White for discussing the Mass Historical Commission process. Want to note that at their meeting on March 9th, they voted 8-2 against recommending the establishment of a single address LHD. Question is, why did the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission ask the State Commission for their opinion on the matter? And why would they continue to pursue the establishment of a district against the recommendation of the State Commission? Is everyone else getting an echo? Okay. The establishment of a local historic district will not save the property. On the contrary, the zoning restrictions imposed on this property will all but ensure the site continues to deteriorate, remains underutilized, and will be underdeveloped for years to come. I want to thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Lilo Zolne, you are unmuted on our side.
Hi, my name is Lilo and I live at 50 Madison Street. I've lived in Somerville for about 20 years now, and I'm for keeping the church. I think it's such a shame that, you know, for 30 years, the Freemason organization has allowed it to fall into disrepair. And for 20 years, I have watched it just crumble and crumble. And I've never seen the organization do anything for the community that I've witnessed, I've seen. And they've even called it, they used to call it historical. There's even articles in the Somerville Times about referencing, you know, fundraisers for themselves. And now they're saying that it has no historical value. So it seems like they're just financially motivated and are just stating things to benefit themselves. And also, I think it's really funny that it's supposed to be about affordable housing when we know that the condos next to it go for almost $1 million, and that only 20% are actually going to be affordable housing. This isn't affordable housing. If it was, more than 20% would go to affordable housing. Rather, I think it would be wonderful with something like we've done with the Arsenal or the police station or the church in Union Square. Sometimes those former schools have been made into apartment buildings, but it would be nice to see that Somerville could do something better and not just allow our history to be torn down and made into more condos. We have so many luxury condos. I would just love to see us, you know, save more of our buildings instead of selling ourselves out. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Lucas Rogers, so I see that your hand is up. I can't unmute you until you enter a PIN which has been sent to you. If you have a chance, please put that PIN in. And I'm going to go to the next person, but I'll be back to see if you've been able to put the PIN number in so that I can unmute you. Louis Domenech, you are unmuted. Louis?
Yes. I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very faintly.
Okay, super. Yes, so my name is Luis Enrique Domenech, and I'm a former resident of Somerville, having lived there for many years, and a member of King Solomon's Lodge. And I oppose the redistricting of 125 Highland Avenue. And at this time, I'd like to read a letter from the Unitarian Universalist Association. And they wrote to us saying, the Unitarian Universalist Association, UUA, is the successor organization to the First Universalist Church of Somerville, and does not have any interest in the building located at 125 Highland Avenue, Somerville, Massachusetts. Furthermore, we do not view this building as having any historical significance, nor do we have any remaining ties to the parish that formerly met there, as the parish that sold the building merged with a nearby congregation. The former church itself does not own property. Additionally, the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission has never contacted the UUA requesting permission to align itself with the church as a means of justification to prevent development. According to our records, the former First Universalist Church of Somerville sold this church building to the Highland Masonic Temple Association because the costs to them of maintaining the building, including costs related to age and weather-related deterioration, were beyond their means and could not be afforded at that time. And this is on the letterhead. That concludes the letter on the letterhead of UUA. So at this point, I'm wondering if the church is saying they don't deem the building to have any historical significance. I'm not seeing where the historical significance of this building resides. And that concludes my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lucas Rogers, you are unmuted.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. Oh, terrific. Thank you so much. My name is Luke Rogers. I live at 11 Westwood Road in Somerville. I live probably about a 10-minute walk away from 125 Highland. This is certainly an expression of democracy. I just think it's wonderful to hear so many members of the community talking about their priorities and their passions, and I thank the Commission for holding this hearing in such a professional way. I support the preservation of 125 Highland, of the former Universalist Church. I think it's a beautiful building. I prefer, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong about this, but I prefer to think about the building as a building. It is, I believe, a sort of Venetian revival, Byzantine revival type of building. It's certainly as historic as my humble house. It's about 100 years old, and I think it is a beautiful addition to our community. I certainly don't condone any racist feelings, and I would add also that I do not believe that this church was a monument to racism, as many of the statues in the South were. So for that reason, I hope the church can be saved. I hope it can be repurposed in a way that is useful to the community, whether that's affordable housing or another community of worshipers or secular enthusiasts who devote themselves to a greater purpose. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark Albushon, so sorry for that pronunciation. You are unmuted.
I'll let it go. Greetings. Thank you very much for hearing me. I will state that I live in Winthrop. I will also state that I have lived all over Somerville, from Pearl Street, Thurston Street, Adams Street, Morrison Ave. Also served the city itself as a paramedic for 10 plus years. I know it well. That said, I am also a member and officer of King Solomon's Lodge, as well as an officer of the Highland Masonic Temple Association. And I have a unique perspective in that I have a lot of sweat equity in this building. I've crawled through it, I've repaired it, I know its systems. I've been in that bell tower. Suffice it to say, I know what this building's structure is and isn't. I'll leave that there. This is a structure. It was a church. It is owned by the Highland Masonic Temple Association. And that's something that isn't really being fully vetted here. And to all those who say there were schools that were done better and there was other, the police station, I appreciate that. I really do. And if the city owned this building, I would fully support the city spending all the money they could to try to do whatever they wanted to with this, but they don't. This is a privately owned building by the Highland Masonic Temple Association. And that is the association that is the owner for King Solomon's Lodge. Just so you have a sense of history, King Solomon's Lodge first officer was the signer of the Declaration of Independence for the now state of Massachusetts. Keep history in perspective. You have on one side a fraternal organization specific to Somerville and Charlestown that actually does represent history and has history throughout it. And as far as what we do for the community, we were benefactors of the Little Sisters of the Poor, which you may or may not remember is just down the road. Yes, ma'am. My time's done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew Carlino, you have been unmuted.
Thank you very much, and thank you for letting me speak at this. My name is Matthew Carlino. I live at 378 Medford Street. I have a sight line to the building. It is, I guess, as the bird flies, like maybe 500 feet, but I can see it. You can see the tower. I am in support of a no for an LHT. And as I said in my letter, I do not feel that the history of this building, the history of this architect, in any way reflects me as a human being or the community that I want to live in if we decide to preserve it. Like, we're talking about a building that is no longer a church. It's relatively new in the grand scheme of things for Somerville. At 1917, this building is 30 to 50 years newer than a majority of most of the houses in the neighborhood. It was built as a building to look old. It is not that old of a building. In its current state, it is in such a level of disrepair that you can almost even question whether it is even notable workmanship of the building. People are saying maybe this can be repurposed into something. We're talking about a building that has windows only on the second story. How are you going to make that into affordable housing? There is no good residential use for that building. You can't just have windows and no doors on the first floor. You can't just shove people into a building and just say, hey, it's low income housing or affordable, and it could be in any condition and any bit of terrible. It's going to require a monumental amount of money to refix that church. And I feel like if the city wants that, they should fund it, fully fund it. But I don't think that it's on the developer or the owner to take that type of hit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have a city councilor who would like to speak as well. Councilor Burnley.
Oh, sure.
Ms. Jekowitz, could you unmute Councilor Burnley Jr., please?
Sarah, what is the first name?
Willie.
Thank you. Willie Burnley, you are unmuted on our side.
Thank you, commissioners. Nice to virtually meet you for the first time. Name is Willie Burnley Jr., Councilor at Large. I will be brief. I will stick to the 2 minutes, regardless of if the clock is ticking or not. And I won't say what my vote will be if this matter reaches the council. I just want to speak to the facts before me. And I appreciate the fact that so many people have gone out of their way to email the council. As one of my colleagues had mentioned, the conversation has been tilted toward demolition from what the council has received via email. I appreciate all those folks who've spoken out today about this and have raised many issues that are of great consequence to our city, whether it is fighting against racism or whether it is dealing with the need for housing in our community that is, as a renter, quite unaffordable and quite difficult to find affordable housing. I will say, as someone who has spent my entire life as a Black person and as a community organizer fighting against racism, that if our community is deciding in this moment that all buildings, all structures, all institutions created by white supremacists should be dismantled, I am all in favor of that. That is what I spent my life doing. I will say that I will gladly accept those folks who are speaking out today and talking about the fact that the Constitution wasn't created by white supremacists. Policing and incarceration are institutions created by white supremacists that serve white supremacist goals. Faneuil Hall, which is a few miles away from our city, is named after someone who sold human beings and has actually had grassroots organizing to change its name by the New Democracy Coalition. So there are, in our broader community, monuments to white supremacy that celebrate their creators and celebrates the goals of white supremacy through impact. Personally, I don't see this building as such because anyone walking past this building has no idea who created it, is not necessarily moved by that, is not necessarily impacted by it. For me, as a counselor, the issue before us is whether this building is historically significant and how this space can be best used for the public good of our community. I want to just say for the record that I appreciate everyone's voices on this issue. I've not decided my vote, but those are the two factors overwhelmingly that will decide how I weigh in on this topic when the time comes. So thank you all for speaking out, and I'll see you at the next council meeting. And I hope to make the acquaintance of each and every one of the commissioners here today to learn more, quite frankly, about this process and the work that has been done on other spaces in Somerville. Thank you.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second, Mr. Chairman. I just need to go back to where it was in my list. All right, Meredith Porter, you are unmuted on our end.
Okay, Meredith Porter, 104 Josephine Ave. I've been a resident homeowner in Somerville for about 45 years now. I'm deeply committed to affordability of housing. I've been spending a lot of time working on that. Racial and social justice. I've also gained quite an appreciation of local history, and I'm all for an inclusive and diverse community. Part of that involves livability, which includes green space, but also architectural diversity. And I'd suggest that some people might want to look at the book Beyond the Neck. I think it gives you a good idea of the diverse architecture that we have in Somerville. It's really rather wonderful. And I think it is possible to develop sites in a way that's sensitive to maintaining that architectural diversity. I'm not sure what the best solution is for this site. I heard some statements that disturbed me. The seller said that the site was essentially worthless, the attorney for the seller. The attorney for the buyer said that any sort of historic preservation essentially runs counter to being inclusive and diverse in the community. That troubles me. I'm troubled by characterization of this building as a monument to white supremacy. I trust the judgment of the Historic Preservation Commission as to what's historically significant. There's a disagreement as to what historical significance means. Some people say that a site is only historically significant if historic events occurred at the site. By that measure, only maybe the Prospect Hill Tower, the Powder House, Milcrow Cemetery would be historic sites. I've heard this position mostly from people who are focused on maximizing their profits, not on housing affordability, and often who are resisting being subjected to affordable housing requirements. Thank you very much, and I leave it to the good judgment of the Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you.
Peter Blakey, you have been unmuted.
Hi, good evening. My name is Peter Blakey. I live at 78 Grand Street in Somerville. I've been here for close to 30 years now. I'm also a member of King Solomon's Lodge, and I am voicing my opposition to the redistricting as a historical site. The real history of that site is the Freemasons who predate the building. And we're willing to sell it because after years of discussion and the issues with the building's structural integrity and the cost of maintaining it from a nonprofit standpoint, it just isn't economically feasible. It was decided years ago that we should be considering looking for a much more modern facility that can be maintained by us under our current budgets, and that the land could be repurposed, in this case, producing more housing and affordable housing up to the limits that are currently prescribed by the city. So I would definitely am opposed to this being changed to a historical district. We're the history and we're fine with it. We will go to another location and continue that life, years and centuries actually of that history in a new facility that will fit our needs. And nobody seemed to come to us all these years ago and ask us for this. So once we decide to sell it, all of a sudden the interest is in there, stopping it. So I kind of question the motives of that, but we'll see what happens. But I do wish you would consider not designating it as a historical center and allow us to move on to a location that is best suited for our needs and let the community develop it as it sees fit without harming our equity in this particular facility. All right, thank you very much for your time, and you have a good evening.
Thank you.
Ron Kalath, you have been unmuted. Ron, you will need to also unmute on your side for us to be able to hear you.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Yes, actually, I'm Rom's wife, Liza, using his computer. I am Liza Kitchell. I live at 50 Oxford Street. I live 1 block away from the 125 Highland property, and also right behind the VFW property, which Tony Barrows is completing the redevelopment of. I guess my comments aren't entirely about the building. I can go either way with the building. It's not a terrific building, but it would be fine to stay there. I guess my primary objection is to just the sameness of development that is happening in the area. There's a sense of fatigue of overdevelopment of luxury condos. And also, having seen the drawings that Tony Barrows has submitted for the property at 125 Highland, I feel that there's just the sameness of a look with the VFW development that's across the street from it. So I think we just don't need 40 more condos there. We need some open space, and we need some truly affordable housing, maybe some really creative housing that's not driven by a developer, and which can accommodate maybe different living styles, co-housing, perhaps smaller living units for people who don't have as much money, young people coming to the city who want a place to begin. So I guess that's, I'm not saying I'm either for or against the district. I'm actually, even though Tony is a very, very nice guy, I'm against the sameness of having many more condos at that location. Would like to see open space too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rochelle Centeo, you have been unmuted.
Hi, everyone. This is actually Representative Liz Miranda. I'm sorry, it looks like I'm on my staffer's go-to meeting or go-to webinar. Thank you all for allowing me time to speak tonight. I know how hard it is to sit on these committees and commissions as an elected official. And normally, this is my second time coming to you, but normally we wouldn't cross boundaries because I represent parts of Roxbury and Dorchester. But tonight, I thought it'd be incredibly important to come back again. I had the pleasure of having Mr. Barrows and some of his team members as my constituents for most of my life. And wanted to speak here tonight about a couple of things. I also sit on the Roxbury Historical Society, and as an elected official, just recently worked with the Shirley Eustace House to stop the development of a property here in Roxbury that will be known as probably the last sort of structure that had living enslaved Africans here in the Northeast, even that predates, I think that's the right word, predates the Royal House in Medford. But tonight I'm here to share a couple of points. I wanted to provide this testimony regarding the proposal to create the First Universalist Church into a local historic district. Although in many cases, I see the value of a local historic district, I have been taken aback by the movements across the country to reject histories that certain white supremacists have monuments and buildings that uphold them. And as a country, I feel like we've moved past the need to commemorate defenders of white supremacy. And I've heard a lot of the testimony about the architectural importance or significance of a building. But I want us to I urge us to follow in the effort and not designate the First Universalist Church as a local historic district based on the previous Mass Historical Commission's response. The preservation of historical architecture does not override, I think, the symbols and histories of people who built these buildings. And racist Anglo-Saxon white supremacy inspired design also causes harm to marginalized communities. Now, Somerville is a very diverse community, just very much similar to Roxbury and Dorchester. But in many of the cases, the commissions and the people who are leaders do not always reflect the community's diversity. And I think after the 2020 racial awakening, we need to be more conscious of the messages that we put into our community. And I could go on and on about the same things that I shared last time, but I want to end here by saying that I believe that there's an opportunity here to have some compromise. I saw Willie, congratulations, Willie, being elected in your historic race, to come together with this developer who is more than a developer. I think we use the word developer very loosely, but based on the Commonwealth's experience and the city's experience, normally developers are not homegrown young people of color who come to communities to not only build affordable or affordable-esque housing, but also people who want to contribute to the development of a community. And I urge this commission to not approve and make this a historical district, but I do believe that there are conversations to be had with Mr. Barrows, and he's a very understanding person, about the ways in which in developing this building, we could still continue to share the history, whether it's tried and true, whether it's not as positive, so that future generations do not forget what was here before in order to continue with dialogue. So thank you all for inviting me and allowing me to speak. I plan to work very closely with Rep. Erdeherven and anyone in Somerville regarding this. And I really want to thank you all for hearing me this evening.
Thank you.
Staff would like to make a note that the 2-minute timer was waived, as is the policy of our boards to not limit the testimony of elected officials. All right, Richard DeVirgilio, you are unmuted on our side.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Richard DiGiulio. I'm associated with 130 Highland Avenue, direct from 125. I've been I was a resident of Somerville from 1980 to 1996, and I'm a trustee of 159 Pearl Street. I can't say enough about what needs to take place across the street. As a senior deacon of the Mission Church of Christ across the street, I've been associated with that church since 1978. And I was 16 at that time. I'm 60 now. We walked through that building with thoughts of maybe purchasing it to try and do something to better our own church across the street. And quite frankly, I advised our pastors to stay away from that building. The mold, the infrastructure, the condition of the building. I don't know how you're going to do anything with that building other than tear it down. To restore it, you're looking at anywhere from $5 to $10 million. I'm a contractor in the Commonwealth. I'm an unrestricted licensed construction supervisor. I own my own business. It's just not feasible to fix that building. And when you do fix it, what would you do with it? The rooms are very awkward and non-conformable to anything but rooms. There's no unification of it at all to do anything structural with it. As far as having been a member of Mission Church for most of my life, I've been associated with a Black congregation. I'm an Italian American. I've been associated with a Black congregation for most of my life, which I've received a lot of pressure for. The idea that there's something that you can hold on to this or make this a historic district because of with the idea that some racist has built this thing is appalling. I say, let's create a new history. And let's be the progressive Somerville that we are. Allow Tony to do what he's done. I've met with Tony. We've talked extensively. He's an excellent human being. And I'd like to see this thing go forward with Tony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Kane, you are unmuted. Scott, you will need to unmute yourself on your side. You are still muted. You're still self-muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to vote against the LHD. I think a lot of people looking at the building from the street might think it looks great, and it does from the street. But if you get up close to it and you actually walk inside that building, you're going to see that the roof is falling down, the doors are hanging off the hinges. I mean, there's mold in there. It's not a place that can be developed. I mean, you have to gut the whole building, basically. And I would invite anybody from the community to go up there and take a closer look. Don't just look from the street. You know, go up there and look at the roof. You know, look at all angles of the building, because it's falling apart when you start to look at it. You know, and I don't know who that councilman from Ward 3 is, but I can't believe he's not prioritizing jobs and the property taxes that would be created from all the condos that would be developed there. That's all I have to say. Thank you for my time.
Thank you. A reminder to please give your address when you speak. Next.
Seth Hurwitz, you have been unmuted. You'll need to unmute yourself to speak.
Hi there. I just want to speak out against designating this site as a local historic district. I think a lot of other folks have made great points about the fact that this is an opportunity to bring desperately needed housing to our city. And the fact that we will get 20% affordable out of Tony Barros's project, I think is commendable. I'm hoping that there's an opportunity for perhaps even mixed use development here if we are able to forego having an LHD at this site. But yeah, I just want to speak out against the designation of an LHD here. Thank you.
Stephen Nutter, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself to speak. Stephen Nutter, you are still self-muted.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I was looking for the button. Thank you very much. Thank you. My name is Stephen Nutter. I'm at 24 Maple, and I'm an urban planner. We should not designate this building as a local historical district. The original owners have stated that they see it has no historical value. And even among the works of the architect, who wrote a book arguing for, in its title, The End of Democracy, it is a lesser example. It is in poor disrepair, and from what I understand, for many reasons, but the present reality is the cost of bringing it up to the energy code, in addition to doing any kind of meaningful historic preservation, and change its programmatic use from civic congregation to residential units, would likely be more expensive than what any development, including affordable housing units, may allow. However, what is worth preserving, though, is the civic congregational space the building afforded, most recently to Centrino Apostolico, and the way that the building provided a small green space in the front. These are key urban design and use elements that have nothing to do with the historic value and can easily be integrated into a new building. So let's not preserve the building and create a new structure that best achieves the goals of Summer Vision 2040, which states that putting equity at the center of our policies is how we live up to our ideals and ensure our community remains safe, vibrant, and supportive of all. And I would like to add that I've worked with a lot of developers over my time as an urban planner and community advocate and community organizer. And Tony is way more than a developer. He's a community member. Thank you.
Teresa Ware, you have been unmuted.
Hi, did that work? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm Teresa Ware, and I live on School Street, right above Medford. It's 187 School Street. with my husband, who I'm speaking for as well because he can't speak right now. And we have lived in Somerville since 1998, and in that house, which we own since 2004. I'd like to support being against it being converted to a historic district and back the people of color in our community, as well as our community. I would say Tony is more than a developer and is also a person of color, and the owners of the building, who I think have made a lot of good arguments for themselves already. And as far as the designation as a historic site, I think it's interesting that the people who argue for that have a lot of emotional pleas, but again, we aren't hearing any real reasons that it's historical other than the architect, which I think we do have plenty of data that he was not something we really want to support. And I love the idea of affordable housing 100%, but no one's going to pay for it unless the city wants to. I love the idea of turning the whole thing into a field, but that's not going to happen. And as far as, I did read the Wikipedia thing on the architect and his anti-Catholic thing. I actually don't agree that he actually supported whatever it said he supported. He did it for his own reasons, not to support the Catholic people. And I think the renters there are also, it doesn't matter, the renters, they're going to have to move on anyway, or maybe they can stay there, but that's a moot point. So I think, I mean, those are mainly the contradictions that I've seen so far come up in this argument. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all.
Tony Barros, you have been unmuted. Tony, you will need to unmute yourself.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm Tony Barros. I'm the developer, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. Obviously, I've been put through a rough patch of time that I will never regret doing. I just want to address a couple of things. Ben, you and Campen, I have a lot of respect for you, and I will remain to have a lot of respect for you. But you've taken a very biased approach on this, and I thought we was in a democracy, and pretty clear that's not what's been the case. I've never been given a fair shot at this. I was never given any information. I was never brought to the table. You know, I lived in Somerville for 10, 11 years. I lived on Bow Street. In fact, I was pushed out by a developer when gentrification has been happening for a very long time. This didn't just start. It's actually what pushed me to doing development. I do meaningful development. I care about the people. You may put the agenda out there that developer Tony doesn't want to do good, developers are greedy. I'm not that guy. Right across the street, I'm doing 124 Highland Ave. Those guys were going through a financial time, and I look beyond the money. I said, guys, give me a fair shot. I will help you guys stay in the community, which has happened. That project is nearing its end, and those guys are going back to that project. You know why? Because I realized it's bigger than the money. I wanted them to end their days there because it meant something to them. I do a lot of meaningful stuff in the community, and I don't go around gloating it because, you know what? I come from a place where meaningful giving is a mandatory. We come from a place where getting lucky is how you get by. And I got lucky to get here, and I'm fighting a fight that's bigger than me. I'm fighting a fight for every person that looks like me. And I will not stop. I played the game fair. I did what you guys asked. Like, we went to MOA. I negotiated with you guys for 9 months. I designed the building twice. You guys told me you loved it and took it back from me. You know, sounds like the story of my life. You know, being black's not easy. You know, being a black developer is even harder. If you guys can, anybody's listening to this, go back and think to yourself, how many black developers do you know? And I can say a lot of folks may say none. So again, I'm here. I understand that, but I'm also the owner and the buyer. And Ben Ewan Campen, who seems to be running a campaign against me, had all the time to speak. I think it's only fair that I get to express my mind since I've been dealing with unforeseen pushback when developers in Assembly Row and Union Square don't get this level of pushback.
Tony, you need to cut. We've given your representative 4 minutes.
Thank you for your time. I think I've made my point very clear.
Yes.
You know, I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Vicki Peterson, you have been unmuted.
Hi, my name is Vicki Peterson. I live at 55 Madison Street. I've been a homeowner there for over 20 years and lived as a renter in Somerville for many years before that. I'll be brief. I am not in favor of designating this as a historic district. I care deeply about history and preservation. I am painstakingly renovating my house and preserving every bit that I can, but I do not see that this building is a good candidate for renovation for reasons that others have articulated better than me. Thank you so much for holding this and for letting us all speak.
Thank you.
Will Alexis, you have been unmuted.
Ms. Chekowitz, this is Rebecca Cooper speaking. I just wanted to note that Will Alexis's account seems to be still registered, but is reading as offline. I would suggest that we move to the next person and come back to him.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Chairman, that is everyone who's been on the list the first time through. I'm going to go from the top of the list to the bottom again. I ask for a moment of patience because this will just take a little bit longer to cross-check the names that have spoken already with any new hands that have been raised. Any members of the public who have yet to speak on this item and would like to speak, please raise your hand. All right. Ann Kamara, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ann Kamara. I live on Hanson Street for 45 years. I am the co-chair of the Union Square Neighborhood Council. I am not representing them tonight, though. I am here because, so you know, to have the Masons want to sell this to a developer that says he cares about his people of color, I only hear money. That's what I hear. If the Masons truly cared about people of color, people of low income, why don't they donate the property to some of a community corporation or to some of a community land trust, or make a compromise with the developer so that maybe 50% of the the development will be affordable. When we say 20% of all development is affordable, it is not truly affordable. It is not for people who make $14 an hour. People that want to stay here in Somerville and live next to their families. People that have children and seniors here that need, and when the Y is sold, they're not going to house anybody anymore. There's 40 people there that need housing. So why not do a larger percent of truly affordable housing in that development if you truly care? I don't like our history being used for the reason of money, to manipulate our history for the reason of money. In Cambridge, my church was developed by Justice Start, and they kept some of the features, which was nice, and they built all truly affordable housing. So a compromise would be great here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ayaz Hamid, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself to speak.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Ayaz. I live in on 105 Cross Street. I am a Muslim American lawyer. And also a tech entrepreneur. I've lived in Somerville for the past 5 years. I moved here when I was 17 with my mother before 9/11, obviously, and I know exactly what racial biases mean, and I know how much you have to do to overcome them to make it in this country, which I love dearly, by the way. So while I was in law school, I went to a lecture where a German professor was talking about the fact that they don't have the death penalty in Germany because their history doesn't allow it. We live in a country where we fail to learn either read or learn from our history. 80% of people on death row are Black. Ms. White went through a very lengthy explanation about how we have laws and procedures and how this committee works. It's not that we don't have laws in this country, which is why 80% of people on death row are Black. It's because those laws are not implemented equally for people. I haven't looked at this in a very detailed manner, but I'll give you my perception. I see a bunch of non-diverse people on this board. I see a Black developer. I see people who own this property wanting to sell it, which is their legal right. And I see a bunch of people who have nothing to do, no economic interest in it, having a bunch of opinions what should happen and should not happen with this property. If there's even a 10% chance that the architect of this building was racist, I think it's about time that we take this opportunity to set the history, do right about the wrongs that we did. Maybe you were wrong about, maybe you're wrong, maybe Tony is wrong about this victory, but give him a chance. Let him help the city of Somerville and let us help him. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going through the list. Esme von Hoffman, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, my husband would like to speak too, but he's putting our child to bed, so I don't know whether I live at 29 Berkeley Street. I want to support the historical designation of the church and save it from demolition. I think that the building just on its own brings sort of diversity. I think the fact that it was not one but has two Latino churches is incredibly important. It's not something that's been talked at all, probably because it does not go along with the financial interests of the developer, but I think Somerville has an incredibly rich history there. I don't know much about the views of the architect. It's not something I think about when I see it, but I do want to point out that the architect would be, by today's standard, considered LGBTQ+. And so by getting rid of the building, if we are judging it by the standards of the architect, we would be erasing that history of Somerville. And I also want to say there's been a lot of people standing up saying nobody has said there's anything of historical significance, but I hear a lot of women saying that, and they are not being heard on this call. So I would like to say that. And if my husband, Jeremiah, was not dealing with our child at the moment, for those of us who deal with childcare, it's hard to be on meetings at this time, but he is also opposed to this. I mean, he's opposed to the demolition of the church. And I'd also like to say our neighbor list emails is generally for all the elected officials on this that actually represent Somerville. Our neighborhood is strongly, from what I can tell, for saving the church and creating affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Mangum, I have been told you had your hand up earlier. I have unmuted you. If you have a public comment, please unmute yourself. Barbara, if you have a public comment, please unmute yourself. If not, I will move to the next person. All right, I'm going to mute you once again and move to the next person. Don Quirk, you are unmuted. Don Quirk, you are unmuted on your side and our side if you would like to speak. Oh. All right, I do not believe Dawn is at her desk. So I'm going to go back and mute her. Elizabeth Leister, you have been unmuted if you would like to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Liz Lister. I'm actually a Cambridge resident. I am a member of the Cambridge Historical Commission, and I'm also a real estate agent, and I'm interested in this case. I want to make the point that often in my experience on the commission and as a real estate agent, we put a lot of responsibility on individual developers to solve institutional problems, and I don't think that that's fair or how it should work. Tony is doing 20% affordable housing, which is a figure that comes from the city. So if the city believes that developers need to create more affordable housing, they can require that by law, but that's not the individual developer's responsibility to go above and beyond that number. The house that any of us are living in right now, unless you built it with your own hands, was built by a developer. It was built by somebody who built property in order to earn a living. So demonizing developers does not serve a purpose in my mind, either as a real estate agent, a community member, or a historical commission member. In my experience, I look at what a building provides. Sometimes, as the Masons have pointed out, it's not the building itself, but it's what's happening in the building that's important. If that historical behavior can be continued elsewhere, then you are still preserving something very important. So I would also am against creating the local historical district in this case, and just wanted to voice my opinion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Anton Tutter, you have been unmuted. Anton, you will need to unmute yourself to be able to speak.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Anton Tutter, and I live at 47 Oxford Street, and I've been a resident of Somerville for 21 years. And we've heard arguments on both sides. And one thing that we haven't heard is whether or not you can have both. You can have preservation of the structure with simultaneous development of multiple housing units, including inclusionary units on the same property. Now, I'm not an architect, and I don't know this property very well, but my understanding is that there is a primary structure that's visible from the street that most people refer to as the church, but there's also a large, perhaps single-story or low secondary structure behind it that is not visible, and I don't even know if it's original to the church or not. And I don't understand why we might not be able to take a hybrid approach and preserve the main structure of the church, perhaps repurpose it into something that would benefit the community, while at the same time allowing the developer to develop multiple units behind it. on the remaining space, and I believe it's a fairly large lot. So I'd like people to think about it in this sense, as opposed to just an arbitrary, binary either or. The second point I'd like to make is that everyone is commending developers who build affordable units. But let's remember, they should be commending the city, because the city came up with the ordinance that requires a certain percentage of housing to be affordable. I don't see this developer proposing anything above and beyond the minimum requirements set by Somerville City Ordinance regarding affordable units. I would like to see the developer go above and beyond that if he really wanted to do something special for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Barbara Mangum, I have unmuted you. You will need to unmute yourself to speak.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I've finally figured out how to do it. Hi, I'm Barbara Mangum. I live at 9 Josephine Avenue in Somerville, and I've lived here for 39 years. I feel very strongly. I like this church very much. I recognize it's not a church anymore, but I have always admired it. I have admired how it's a great counterpoint to the Mission Church across the street from it. I also am very fond of the Masons. I don't want to see them taken out of Somerville. So this is a very hard situation, I feel. I've looked at the building just briefly because of this hearing that we're having tonight, and I can see that it has tremendous problems in terms of water penetration. And I also know that the Somerville Museum had tremendous problems in terms of the basement being moldy and wet, and we've actually tackled that, and we're doing a great job now. And we've gotten over $1 million from the Community Preservation Act to do this work. And so I'm really hoping again that we can have our cake and eat it too, and that yes, there can be affordable housing and housing units by the developer behind the church, but that the church, which I don't see the building as being a symbol of racism. I mean, it had the Unitarians in it who are not known for being racist, and it had the Latina church members in it, which I don't believe you could call them racist. So I really hope that we can come up and work with the developer even more to come up with a scheme that allows both sides to be happy. And that's all.
Thank you.
Armindo Gonçalves, you are unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself to be able to speak.
Good evening, committee members, and thank you for allowing me to speak. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes. I come before you as a member of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Massachusetts with the African American Fraternal Order as part of Masons, speaking on behalf of King Solomon's Lodge and also the developer. I was at the original hearing last year, and I'm back here full circle. 3 points I'd like to make, if I can. Early on, it was mentioned that the mass historical vote was insignificant, and I beg to differ, because if it was a positive vote in favor of the city, we would be flaunting that. Secondly, we keep talking about developer. I being a minority, having done work in real estate and architecture and so forth, there's so very few of us in this arena, and there's a reason why there's so very few of us, okay? And unless you're on the other side of the aisle, you can't really get an appreciation of what young professionals such as myself and Tony and others are like go through on a daily basis, okay? Beyond our qualifications, okay? And I won't touch upon those. It's also interesting to me that, and this happens quite often, almost everywhere I go into projects, okay, across the nation. I'm always facing an entity or an organization or someone who's gonna decide on my fate that has no relationship with my culture or my community. They don't even look like me, okay? And that's, so we have to understand that sort of that power and social dynamic we're dealing with, okay? You can never fit in my shoes, and I can never fit in yours. Okay, but boy, if you can ever fit in my shoes, you'll feel a bit more weighty than any other time in your life. So I'm against this designation. Okay, one is I think the Masons are being given the short end of the stick, and so is Tony. So I'm in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, people to please give their address when they speak.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just looking through the list for the next raised hand. Jeremiah Hay, you have been unmuted. You will just need to unmute yourself.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thanks to everybody for this discussion. I mean, I've heard a lot here tonight. I think all due respect to the organization and its members, I think the Masons as an organization are largely irrelevant, although they're certainly well represented here tonight. I mean, I'm a young working man with 2 young children. I wonder what Somerville's going to look like when they're growing up. And I think whatever you think about the state of the current building, I know who owns it. And if that roof has fallen in, I know who's owned it. Well, that roof has started to fall in, and now it says it needs to be torn down. I also think that, look, I mean, like, this is a story we've all heard a million times. I know exactly how it works. And man, Tony sounds like a great guy, but whew, 32 market rate units and 8 affordable units is not going to fix affordable housing in Somerville. I think anybody who tells you it is, all right, I think we might think the problems that Somerville faces are different. Yeah, I mean, look, architects does not seem like a good guy to me, but I would ask everybody to find out if they know who built their house and what they think. I feel like there's got to be a way to take advantage of the space and do something other than just build another 3 or 4 story condo unit in it. And look, like I have nothing against the Masons as an organization, but as a nonprofit organization, if you guys want to do the right thing with this property and like actually do a social good and do a good for the folks of Somerville, I mean, make it 100% affordable, right? So yeah, if you got to tear it down, go ahead, make it 100% affordable, do the right thing. And if you got to, I would prefer to keep it and do something interesting with it. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.
Joanne Larrabee, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself to speak.
Hello, I'm Joanne Larrabee. I live at 48 Madison Street, and I support the LHD designation. I think most of the points that others have spoken to in support of the designation mirror some of my own feelings, but I just want to take a minute to point out kind of the paradox right now that I'm seeing us talking about putting up additional market rate condominiums in an area where a new Green Line station is about to open. And I'm also reading constantly about the displacement of people in Union Square, long-term residents who are being priced out because of the new development trends in that area. And it's just hard to reconcile a pressure point that will be exacerbated by additional, primarily market rate, high-end living structures. So I think it's time to think about how could a very unique space in the city be used in a more purposeful way than another 2020 condominium structure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Malcolm Mitchell, you have been unmuted. I see your name has been used twice. Is it that you are signed in two devices, or is there someone else also signed in under your name?
Yes, I was using two devices. Is there an echo, or is my voice okay?
Slight echo.
Okay. It's a
Okay.
slight echo.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let me just take a walk over here. Give me 1 second. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I am the pastor of Mission Church of Christ in Somerville at 130 Highland Avenue. And again, it has been a pleasure to work with all of you all in City Hall. And I invite everyone on this call to come by and visit the church. That is my first priority. Come by anytime on a Sunday. We would love to have you and host. I'm speaking in support of my friend Tony Barrows, and also as someone who is a former resident of the city of Somerville. I live right behind the church on Berkeley Street. My wife lived in Somerville as well, and again, we know the community, and I think that it is imperative that we consider what the affordable housing proposal Mr. Barrows is trying to propose would do for our community. I think it's important that we put people together in circumstances where they can create community. You know, there's a scripture, a proverb, and it says, how can two walk together unless they find agreement? And it's important that we put people of different distinctions and socioeconomic backgrounds into the same environment, and they're surrounded by churches and other institutions and groups that can provide opportunities for these people to collaborate and grow their community. And in the letter that I wrote, I was very specific about what is happening in the building across the street. I hear a number of people talking about the worshiping congregation there. The congregations grow and move. We've been in that building across the street at 130 Highland Avenue for over 40 years, and we're carrying debt just to sustain it. We have a number of people. We have a large congregation, about 200 people go into that building on a Sunday on average, sometimes even more. And we're in debt trying to maintain it and keep it up. But that's our building and we love it. We have a different situation across the street. The building is deteriorating, it's beyond repair, and we need to move forward with a project that develops the community and brings folks together. I hope that helps. My time is up. I can see the timer has reached 0. And as a preacher, I know the difference between a preaching minute and a real minute. So God bless you all and enjoy your night.
Thank you.
Michelle Hansen, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself to be able to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I would like to say that I support the LHD designation, and it's for the following reason. I live at Warren Ave in 26 Warren Avenue in Somerville. I've lived here for over 40 years. My family has lived in Somerville for over 100 years. I am calling for a halt to the permitting of any more unaffordable housing until we have a comprehensive plan to create the maximum amount of affordable housing in the city of Somerville. The new structure as proposed will not meaningfully add to the stock of affordable housing. In fact, it will add to the problem of increasing the rents and the property taxes, which are pushing the people who in the city of Somerville out of the city, including many people from the BIPOC community and immigrants. It will also close the door to new families who are working class immigrants. And it is a shame that a city that was known for its working class is going to be losing all of its people. The Green Line has come to Union Square, and I have watched, there are probably 4 families left that I grew up with. People have been pushed out. Anything that will add to that, I am against. And I think that the idea of creating this building as a completely affordable housing is a much better idea. And I also question using a very important social issue to forward the desires of a developer to make more money. I'm not really sure that I believe that this isn't just about making money. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Michael Grunko, a staff member, had noted that you had previously had your hand up. You are unmuted if you would like to speak.
Thank you. Mike Runco, moved to Somerville in 1968, moved to 51 Berkeley Street in 1971. I believe that this building was not a monument to racism, and if it's a monument to anything, it's the failure of the Masons to maintain it. Sadly, if they're Masons, they should have been able to keep it fixed, for crying out loud. The building presents as a pleasant part of a street that is going to be turning more and more into a solid wall of structures built to the edge to look like the one that's right across the street. And the thing that makes Somerville a pleasant place to live is when you walk down that street, and I do it all the time, is there are different kinds of buildings. There's a sort of a Romanesque style wooden building that we managed to save, actually, probably about 20 or 30 years ago, when it and a twin next to it were going to be torn down. And the one next to it got torn down, and what got built? Another brick face building right on the street. You know, if the sanctuary of that building could be saved, and there's enough room in the back where an auxiliary building exists, as Anton described, to go ahead and build quite a few units of housing, and hopefully many of them affordable. It requires a very creative developer or the city to get in there and to do that. I strongly believe that the city can do better, and we don't have to go for the most expeditious and least commendable way of doing things. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a good time trying to make your way through all of this debate. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Nicole Bukowski, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself to speak.
Hi, my name is Nicole, and I lived in Somerville for about 10 years off and on. Most recently lived at 33 Chetwynd, and I don't live directly in the city right now, but I've been working in the city for many years. And I work in a community where we mostly work with people that are minorities. I live in a community where people's voices are not mostly heard. And I came in not knowing a ton about this issue, and I'm just sitting here and seeing the board in front of me that is making this decision. And it just makes me question how ethical and how unbiased it can be when no one looks like the developer. And it just makes me wonder how, if this person coming to you and proposing this development had been white, how the conversation and where this has happened to the developer would be different. And I am fully in support of Tony Barros and for the project he is developing, and because for other individuals in the community that look like Tony and need someone like Tony to look up to, that is what the community needs, much more than preserving another building that, from what I'm hearing, not knowing anything about this building going into it, is not something that the community really needs. And what Tony is proposing creates an opportunity for a minority developer who does not really get seen in Somerville to make an impact for multiple generations of younger people who look like Tony and need a role model of Tony to do something for their lives too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sam Nee, you have been unmuted.
Hi, my name's Sam. I'm a member of the Highland Temple, Masonic Temple Association, and a member of King Solomon's Lodge. I've heard a lot from people about the historical significance of the building and around like wanting to preserve their neighborhood. I totally get that. I'm from Massachusetts. I understand wanting to preserve the historical nature of it. It's one of the things that makes New England a great place to live. And I understand that it's really, people want to keep the green spaces and open spaces. That makes a lot of sense to me. But this isn't really, we're not talking about someplace like the Armory. We're talking about some place that isn't really actively used as any kind of art center or anything along those lines. It would be something that being able to turn it into a apartment complex with affordable units for people, for more a diverse type of people to live in Somerville. I, for one, cannot afford to live in Somerville just due to the fact that the cost of housing was prohibitive in terms of being able to either buy or even search around for that kind of thing. So it is, I'm not necessarily it's just sort of a question of it being, I understand that there's a crisis of housing in the city, and I'm acutely aware of that as somebody who looked around for a place to live recently. So I think it makes a lot of sense to be voting no on the local historic district and making sure that we allow Tony to actually build a bit of the units that he is looking to build, and make a certain portion of those affordable for people who are of lesser means. The Masons are not looking to get rich off of this. This is the only equity we have. We would like to stay in the city of Somerville, and selling our building is a part of that, of a way of looking to stay in a building that we could actually more reasonably maintain and afford and engage the community more. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Sam, can you please give us your address?
I am not, I live in Melrose. I am not a resident of Somerville.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Will Alexis, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself on your side to be able to speak.
Yes, good evening. Thank you guys for your time, and I'm not going to take too much of it. I wanted to speak on behalf of my relationship with Tony Barrows. A lot of people have been speaking about, developers coming into the city and, their agendas being not to give back or to benefit the city. But me being from the city of Somerville my whole life, I own 16 Newberry Street, Somerville, Mass. And I currently own my business out of Somerville as well, which is PlayFit Lab, which is a concierge fitness, corporate health and wellness company. But we also do programs and activities for the youth. I've also been an assistant football coach here since 2013. And whenever I've called on Tony, who I've met through another developer friend of mine, in assistance for helping us with our programs, the city doesn't really have the money or the resources that they need to really take care of our kids as far as during the summer, springtime, as far as creating events and activities for them. Reaching out to Tony 4 years ago was a no-brainer to my friend, and it became a no-brainer to me. Developers like Tony are people that I admire, I look up to. Him being a minority, having roots in the city himself showed me why it was so important for him to give back, or why it was so easy for him to not only help us with, paying for sessions for the kids through the Somerville Boxing Club in East Somerville, or donating basketballs to our 3-on-3 competitions that we have in the summer. We raised money for fallen Somervillian Leonis Almanzar, who passed away abruptly 2 years ago, and his family had an issue providing that or taking care of that. Yes.
You have run out of time if you would like to wrap up your thought.
Yes. So long story short, I am for Tony being able to develop the building. I've been a Somerville resident here. I've seen it. It's disheveled, it's distressed, and it's not doing or serving any purpose or any benefits to anybody in the community. And if we could do something else with it, I think it'd be the best thing for Somerville. Thank you.
Zachary Atwell, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute on your side to be able to speak.
Great. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Zachary Atwell. I'm against the creation of the local historic district. I currently reside in Medford, Massachusetts, but I was a Somerville resident from 1998 to 2002, living at 21 Elm Street. I have been a member of King Solomon's Lodge since 2011. I would have liked to have remained a Somerville resident, but frankly, I couldn't afford to buy a home within the city. So I did the next best thing. I moved a mile away and I bought a house in Medford, gateway to Somerville. So I appreciate the diversity and the vibrant culture of Somerville, and I love being a resident. But I'd stay connected through Somerville now by being a member of King Solomon's Lodge and participating in the charitable work that we do in the Somerville community, like the blood drives that we do up at the Armory, working for food pantries, doing fundraisers for the Little Sisters of the Poor. But most importantly, since I'm a member of King Solomon's Lodge, I'm intimately familiar with the structure at 125 Highland, both the interior and the exterior. And if you haven't been inside of that building, I encourage you to take a look at the inside of it. We'll let you take a look at it. It's abysmal. And it's not due to us not being operative masons and not being able to take care of the building. It's because the building is extraordinarily costly to maintain. Far too costly for a church group or a nonprofit fraternal organization to afford to maintain it. And it just, due to the configuration of the building, as somebody mentioned earlier, the windows within the church are just on the second level. So it's dimly lit, poorly configured in there. It's not really suitable for public functions. And there's so many numerous accessibility issues. The building is really in dire need of repairs and expensive renovations to make the structure viable. So we really need affordable housing within Somerville, and this would be an ideal location for apartments or condos or any kind of housing. If there's more housing, that will increase supply and drive down the cost. So once again, we should not create an LHD here. We need to create more housing. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I am going to go do another run through the list. Once again, this may take longer just because I have to double check with the list of people who have already spoken. All right, Mr. Chairman, I do not see anyone with their hand raised who has not yet spoken. I'm going to do one last pass through. All right, Mr. Chairman, there is no further public comment. You may close the public hearing portion of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will close the public hearing public comment portion of this hearing. And the next step would be for us to deliberate it. Before we do, does the staff have any clarification or things that we'd like to add before we start talking about it as a commission?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Ms. Way. I don't think I really have anything to add for clarifying points, unless there's anything in particular you would like me to. I think we've spoken about really the key key points already at the beginning, and I would just reiterate those the statements a second time.
Okay, thank you. Well, before we start, so we heard from a number of people, and just to remind, we got, in addition to the people commenting, we had another, what was it, 65 letters?
Let me double check the last count. Yes, 65 emails.
And some of those are overlapping. Some of the letter writers did also present this evening. So just so that everyone understands, there's a little bit of overlap.
Cross-checking every single one. So yeah, let's talk. Who wants to weigh in first? Mr. Bingham, would you like to?
I was going to say, I would like to add one thing, which is just, Mr. Chairman, that to everyone who bemoans the lack of diversity on the commission, we would encourage more folks to be joining. We're actively searching for members at the moment anyway, and there are several openings. So we would love to be a more diverse commission. This is who happens to sit on it at the moment. And recognizing that, yes, there is systematic issues that lead to commissions typically looking the way we do here tonight, we'd love to be part of rectifying that. And I'd encourage folks who have an interest in historic preservation to reach out, regardless of this issue.
Thank you, DJ. Yeah. Initial thoughts? Mr. Bingham?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. And I'd like to second what DJ said about the diversity. I've been now on the commission for 12 years. And in those 12 years, we've been searching for people to come on the commission. We'd love to see more people come on. I'm sad to hear that some of the comments have been concerning Mr. Barros and the fact that he's Black, and that has some sort of special resonance against us because we as white Caucasian people are the descendants of white supremacy, supposedly. I'd just like to say this, I'm an immigrant. I was not born here in the United States. And I have lived in Asia where I have experienced racism right up front and hard. And while I didn't get it every day, I do understand what it is. And I, like some of the people who spoke tonight said, I could not imagine what it's like to live every day in the shoes of a person of color who's been discriminated against. Well, with that said, you know, what I'd like to say is this. When this first came before the commission nearly a year ago, we looked at it on the basis of the significance of the structure, and then we looked at it on the basis whether it should be preferably preserved. The question came up of Krem's white supremacy, and that triggered something in me, and I felt an obligation to go and do quite a bit of research, because this is something that had never come up before the commission in my tenure before. So I looked into this. I bought Graham's books. I downloaded his books off the web, and I struggled to find a lot of comment about white supremacy. I didn't find anything, as some people attuned inferred that he was possibly gay. He was married, I know that, but lots of gay people are married as well. So the only reference I found was as Councillor Ewan Camden sort of described, was in a paper by Jed Mudson in 2016. That was an inference with his relationship with McBee, and especially with Teddy Roosevelt, both of whom were avowed racists. And I read books, and some of the books that I read were interesting. I think if you look at books like The Decadent, where he actually puts himself into a novella, which actually describes how he comes back to Boston and actually visits some of the people that he used to mentor and is appalled by them and their treatment of people of other races. And he mentions those races and he mentions what they do. And it's quite an indictment of white supremacy that he actually writes about. So I'm not compelled by the argument that he was a white supremacist. If he was, then he should be condemned for it. If he wasn't, then we shouldn't condemn him for it. So I would urge some caution on that. When I look at the building, and I think King Solomon's Lodge has been well represented tonight, and I think they've also made the argument for the last 33 years, they've had a significant presence in the city, in that building, as have and forgive me, my pronunciation of Portuguese isn't very good, but the Portuguese lady who did say the name of the organization did come up with it, and the Universalist Church. Cram was actually hired by the Universalist Church to design that. And we know that they had a lot of outreach and they were for equity and equality and inclusion. So I'm sort of confounded by that one. And I think King Solomon's Lodge has also made a case that they have a history with the building too, which when we look at the history of the building, we look at what it was used for, who occupied it, what was significant about that, and what that culture brought to the city. And I think King Solomon's Lodge have actually added to the historical significance of the building in what they've said. Architecturally, the style, the Italian Romanesque, is quite unique for somebody, for us in the city, and it's unique for the architect. He was very keen on his Gothic styles, and as mentioned, he was more keen on the English style than the German style. And so I find this to be quite a unique building and an interesting building. And I don't think anybody is questioning Tony Barris's integrity when he came before us. I think we all saw him as a developer who was local to the city with the city's interest in heart, as are many of the developers that come before us. There was no difference. But it would seem to me that this building is importantly associated with important people, the architect being one. I think it's remarkable because of its architecture, and it forms part of an important streetscape standing on top of Central Hill. And it takes a prominent position on the high side of the road. So we have looked at other buildings that have been churches in the city before, Grace Baptist Church, Peabody Church, the church up on the corner of Central and Broadway, and all have been repurposed. And I would like to see this repurposed properly. That is my personal feelings. I feel it's significant. It's on a historic register. It should have been a local historic district many years ago. And I would like to support that we declare this to be a local historic district for the historic merits that it has. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bingham. You else have thoughts? Mr. Bauer, you look like you might have something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to start with the ordinance and what it tells us to be considering. So the ordinance regarding historic preservation says that our job is to take care of the protection, enhancement, preservation, and use of historical resources, and particularly which represent or reflect elements of the city's cultural, social, economic, political, or architectural history. Comment has been made about the vote that was taken by the Mass Historic Commission. There was no reason given by the commission for their vote. I listened to the recording of the commission meeting, and only one person who voted against it being an historic district stated his reasons. He specifically said he was not voting against it because of Ralph Adams Cram, or because of things that people had said about Ralph Adams Cram, or because of its architecture. He said he was voting against it for two reasons. One was that the building needed a lot of work, and the other was that the buyer and the seller didn't want it in a historic district. The purpose of historic districts, as I just said, is to preserve the historic fabric of the city. And it's our job to look at the merits of that, regardless of whether the buyer and the seller would like to have it be in a historic district or not. And so the Historic Commission, Mass Historic Commission decision, in addition to being not binding on us, doesn't shed any light on the decision that's in front of us. Mr. Bingham mentioned the allegations made against Ralph Adams Cram. Ralph Adams Cram was one of the preeminent architects, American architects, of the first half of the 20th century. There was a wealth of material written about him. He actually made it onto the cover of Time magazine not too long after he designed the First Universalist Church. He himself wrote dozens of books. In looking for material to try and assert that Mr. Cram was a white supremacist, we've been offered none of his published works, none of the published works about him, but we've been offered 2 unpublished papers by students. And neither of those actually points to any actions by Mr. Cram or any words by Mr. Cram that would make him appear to be a white supremacist. There was a mention earlier of an article that Mr. Cram wrote called "Why We Do Not Behave Like Human Beings" in 1932, in which he said, "Why do we not behave like human beings? For by and large, we certainly do not." He says, regarding dispassionately the history of what we call civilization, as history becomes clearer, so does the evidence of a pretty invincible beastliness. It's a farrago of cruelty, slaughter, and injustice. And then he makes a list of some of the things that he thinks constitute this cruelty, slaughter, and injustice. And this list that he's made of things that he says are cruelty, slaughter, and injustice include the African slave trade, the debauching of the Negro tribes, and our treatment of American Indians. Although it's been said that he was anti-immigrant, in 1928, Al Smith ran for president. He was the first Irish Catholic nominee for president, and anti-Catholic rhetoric was really big during that campaign. And Cram made a statement to the New York Times saying, "I express my disgust at the ignorance and superstition now rampant, and in order that I may go on the record as another of those who, though not Roman Catholics, are nevertheless Americans and are outraged by this recrudescence of blatant bigotry operating through the most cowardly and contemptible methods." It's pretty hard to see anything in the record that is in front of us that shows Ralph Adams Cram was a white supremacist. I think that's been dragged out in order to try and influence our decisions, which ought to be on the merits. Of whether this building is historically important and ought to be in a historic district. And I think that it does on multiple grounds. One of them is its architectural significance. It is by Cram, who, as I noted, is one of the preeminent architects of the first part of the 20th century. It's the only Cram building in the city. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, and it's an architecturally significant building. It's Romanesque revival and quite a unique piece of architecture, which is well preserving on its own, even separate from the fact that it's associated with an important architect. Not only is preserving it not a monument to white supremacy, it's a monument to the First Universalist Church that occupied it for so many years. A church that was committed to universalism, opposed to bigotry. It's also a monument to the churches of color that have occupied it since then. And finally, as several people have noted, it doesn't stand alone. It stands in a prominent place on Highland Avenue, diagonally across from the Mission Church. And together they form a gateway through Somerville. And so in terms of its history, in terms of its architecture, in terms of its association with important persons, and in terms of its contribution to the streetscape, this building is almost a paradigmatic example of a building that ought to be in a historic district. As Mr. Bingham noted, we considered including it in a historic district. Years ago, we only got partway through the process, but it is not too late for us to remedy that. And so I too would support recommending to the City Council that this building be included in a historic district.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Vice Chair Kelly.
Thank you. This has been an incredible evening of civic engagement, and all of the input and letters that we have had from the public, from members of the Masons, from our elected officials, from everyone who is helping us think through this. And as was noted by George Proakis in the beginning, we will make a recommendation based, as the Historic Commission, based around the history of the structure of the property, for the City Council to then decide whether the local historic district should be established, if we should find that we want to recommend that. I very much appreciate everyone's input and interest in thinking through this. The Historic Commission's purview, what we can think about, what we can't think about, unfortunately does not include what the current owner or the developer wishes to do. It does not hinge on the qualities or characteristics of the developer. Although Tony, you've got a lot of loving support for you, and I would like to meet you someday because you sound like a great guy. But unfortunately, we can't, in determining the historic nature of this building, of this structure, factor in those considerations. It's not part of what we are here to do. And so in terms of thinking about the structure, the things that I look to in determining whether I think it's historically meritorious is that, as an example of Romanesque revival design, it's unique in the city, and that's important. Its relationship to the church across the street is really important. It does, as Mr. Bauer indicated, sort of present a gateway to some of our more prominent buildings that are sited atop Central Hill, which was not an accident. And that the association with the Universalist Church is really, in my mind, very important to the history of Somerville. And so many of their teachings and beliefs align very much with what we know of current Somerville and the aspirations that so many of us have for this city in celebrating diversity and democracy and all of those values. And so those associations, the congregations that have lived their lives, celebrated weddings, baptisms, prayed together at funerals, that's all important. The work of the Masons, of course, has been incredibly important. through our country's history and before. And we certainly hope that they will find a good home still within Somerville. And as was noted, I think by Mr. Bingham, that their own history with the building is part of the history that's important. Yeah, I have a very hard time seeing this building go entirely. I think it is an important historic structure, and that there is opportunity to retain the prominent street facing portion of the building and redevelop in the back. Again, that's not part of our purview, unfortunately, with this. I know that for a lot of people, that's the consideration to take. We are limited in what we can think about. And in terms of, my personal opinions about things, it's unfortunately not what we can think about right now. But I do think with regard to Cram and his prominence as an architect is certainly something to be considered. It's the only building of his in the city. That it is a simple example of his work. Some have said, oh, it's a simple example and therefore doesn't merit preservation. I think that the opposite is true, that because it was built for a Universalist church, and in a city like Somerville, the fact that it is more Spartan and simple is an important aspect of the church. That there are concerns about Cram's views and beliefs, which unfortunately I'm not a scholar, and I don't have, the information needed to evaluate that. I do recognize that there is enough there to warrant further study, and I would hope that any future structure at the building, the preserved building or otherwise, will discuss whatever the true nature of Cram and his beliefs, and also this concern that has been raised today and the hurt that I believe is genuine from the people who've shared that. But I don't think that we as the Historic Commission are able to necessarily factor that in. And I see sufficient historic merit outside of Cram's involvement in the building at all. And so I would also support the establishment of a local historic district for 125 Highland.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kelly. Anybody else want to weigh in there? EJ, looks like you might have something.
Yeah, trying to organize my thoughts. Want to weigh in is a strong term in some respects, but I feel I ought to in any case. I think one of the things I'd like to ask for, people to consider is that when we as a commission voted that the structure be preferably preserved, part of my feeling at the time in voting so, and I stated as much in the meeting, was to enable the community conversation to really have a chance to take place and to hear the reasons coming from both directions and to have time to do more of the research as folks have done into what Mr. Cram's views actually were, to the extent that we can know them. I mean, he's not available to defend himself except in his own writings. And I will point out that Mr. Bauer glossed over a few other examples in that writing in the interest of time about other things that Cram was decrying, like the treatment of the, you know, the Aztec and Mesoamerican cultures by the Spanish and so forth. And if anything, that essay to me read much more like a denouncement of supremacism than support of it when I read through it personally. But as you know, as Vice Chair Kelly has said, you know, Mr. Cram's views are to some extent not the issue. I'm also torn mostly at the process and the situation that we find ourselves put in here, that there's a developer who is, you know, by all accounts, a wonderful, you know, son of Somerville who's trying to do right by the city, and an organization that currently owns the building that has done a lot for the city. And they both feel that they're in a position where there's not a viable path to reuse of the building. And yet we have, you know, reports from staff that someone has spoken to them without getting into any details with us really about it, that there is a potential viable path forward. And we had the woman from Cambridge, who, I apologize, I've forgotten your name, testifying about the work that Justice Start did at her former church building. And because of the timing of this, it feels like there's not really due time to explore those things and put the parties into conversation before the demo delay would expire. And it feels like it's a shame to me that the discussions in the memorandum of agreement started to fall apart when the commission, you know, voted to ask staff to prepare a report and see whether the building should be a local historic district. I think if that hadn't been taken as a hostile action, it's a process that simply takes months. And if it was going to happen, it needed to start when it started. Right? It's my understanding that that's why we started the process when we did. If that hadn't effectively shut down communication somehow between the developers team, all of this might have come to light, and those potential avenues for reuse might have been more firmly explored, which I think is a bit of a shame. Other folks have spoken to the architectural history and the significance of it to the streetscape. I mean, my own personal feeling is it is not a building that, to me, I want to be careful how I phrase this, because it could come out wrong. It's not a building that to me is grand or impressive of itself, but it definitely does, in the way it's situated on the site, you know, on the crest line of Central Hill, plays a significant role in the streetscape and in the sense of things there. Which, you know, as the landscape architect, that's sort of the lens I take it on. Is I'm not as well trained in the architectural history, although I did minor in it. But it definitely is a major contributor to the streetscape, and a presence at that spot that it would be a shame to lose. I don't know, though, that I'm fully confident that the avenues for reuse that have been proposed have been as fully explored by the folks proposing them as Mr. Barros and his team have done looking at the building. So I'm in principle, I like the idea of preserving the building. In practice, I hope that it is possible, but I have concerns about tying everyone's hands and then finding out that it isn't too. And I guess where would we go from there if it turns out that, you know, none of the proposals for adaptive reuse do pan out? If the Masons are left holding a structure that they're not allowed to tear down, you know, that causes a problem. It falls into even further neglect. Is there precedent for a building that is a local historic district getting to a point where it needs to come down? I'm trying to recall what that becomes. I mean, I think the possibility exists that that could happen. Does anyone have any recollection of
Yeah, typically that's the case when they're damaged by fire or earthquake or some collision, and that's basically the cases that I've been aware of.
Yeah, but you know, in those cases, it's the structure is gone.
Yeah, not just neglect.
Right, but I think that, you know, if the lodge is not in a position to financially maintain it, neglect comes across as willful as opposed to simply economically unfeasible for them, which is worrisome. I mean, I don't want to get too far down that road. I think the one other thing that someone mentioned that I would like to address is there was a mention, at least one, of, you know, when else does this happen? Well, I think there have been other properties in the city during my time that during demolition review have been proposed as part of local historic districts, and with actually a lot less robust feedback and community processes this has had. So I think that this has gotten more of a consideration due to all of the issues that have been raised about it than has sometimes been the case when it's clearly a building of architectural significance. But I guess that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Mr. Shagman. Well, Mr. Falvey, do you have anything you want to add?
Took me a second to find my unmute button there. Yeah, just to start, just thank everyone for coming out and sharing their thoughts on this topic. It's clearly a lightning rod for concern from so many, you know, that just touches on so many challenges that we have in society right now. But it's great to hear so many people come out and really express concern about these items. One of the concerns I have, it seems as though, you know, the process seems kind of far down the road when you're talking about coming up with the contracts, and then, you know, I'm not certain about the sequence of events when community meetings were had and such, but I'd be just curious to know about the actual timeline of different conversations that were taking place, and had it seem as though the Masons were following a certain set of guidelines, and as they had expressed a number of different times, to doing what they thought they should have been doing in order to kind of follow the right sequence of events in order to take care of transition of the building and take care of their future. And then meetings are taking place without their full knowledge, or at least it appears that way, and I haven't heard anyone refute that. And it just, you know, and I'm sure that it's everyone doing a lot of different things and everyone busy and people probably just not communicating particularly well, but there does seem to be some missteps along the way that, you know, in a project like this, I can clearly understand why it would create frustration for people. And so I think, you know, we'll probably be running into this in the future, and it's probably worthwhile just stepping back a little bit to even the opening remarks of the lawyer for the Masons saying, you know, she was hearing first time of a potential solution, working with the city to find a developer who could potentially approach the project differently than Mr. Barros was planning, for tax credits or something like that. And I think she expressed made the statement like, I hadn't heard about this previously. And so I'm just, making the observation that it seems as though the sequence of events and the way information is communicated between different parties here seems to create more tension in the process than maybe is optimal, right? And so we're not here to resolve that necessarily, but I want to put that on the table because it is a concern. As far as the history of the building is concerned, I mean, to me, I feel as though it's pretty easy to say it's been a pretty significant building ever since it's been standing. Just looking at all the great work that seems to have been taking place there by the organizations that have occupied that space. I am not familiar with the Masons in the past. I, have greatly appreciated hearing the comments from so many of their members tonight. Respect for them and what they do. And the Universalists, I know what their agenda is far more clearly than I had understood previously. And, knowing that they're standing for abolition, things like abolition of slavery, the principle of the separation of church and state, supporting the 15th Amendment, ordination of women and things of that nature. That's as far as I'm concerned, good things are happening there when you have organizations like the Masons and like the Universalists who are occupying the space. And it would be really wonderful if there's some way that we could, continue to have that legacy live on in that space. I share the concerns of all the other, all the other commission members who are kind of wrestling with the decision here. I've gone past the building. I haven't been inside of it. I've walked around it. I can certainly appreciate the state of disrepair. I thought the comments made by Anton Tutter, where he was questioning whether or not, there's a middle road here where you maybe can retain the front end of it and then just put some big development in the back end of it. I thought that was a real interesting comment. I don't know how much time has been spent sussing something like that out. I think it could potentially be a win-win. I mean, I'd love to, know how something like that could play out. But again, it seems like we're so far down the path now, and Tony Barros with his group, no doubt, have made significant investments. I mean, he talked about having submitted 2 different plans to the group, or up for review. And so again, I think that if some of this stuff had been examined earlier on in the process, it may make for an easier point right now. But I think that we're the horse is out of the barn here, right? And I think a decision does need to be made probably sooner rather than later. I just don't know how urgent it is. And I would feel that if there is a way to kind of step back for a minute and look at some of the options here to potentially make this a win-win for everyone. When Barbara Mangum gets up and is saying, over at Somerville Museum, we've gotten $1 million of funding in order to be able to help restore and mediate, the mold in the basement. That takes a long time to get your hands around that money. We have no doubt about that. But if there is, for example, an opportunity to structure some sort of arrangements where some of the public funding, the CPA money or whatever it may be, or another fundraising effort could help out with it, that's a huge undertaking. I understand that. I'm not sure if anyone has the stomach to go down that path, but if we care a lot about this building and and how it's repurposed and how it's used, it may be worth having that conversation. So, that I don't really have too much more than that, other than I am very thankful for the time that the people have spent this evening sharing their comments and their, very clear concerns about the process that has gone on. Entirely understand that, and lastly, DJ opened up his remarks by saying, join the commission, please do join the commission. We are, we would love to have more people that, you know, representation from different individuals. And we're always looking for people who have an interest in these sorts of topics. So we invite any of you who may have an interest that way. And thank you, you know, thank you again, all of you who have spent the time to come out and put your mark on this conversation. Those are my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Falvey. Yeah, I'll ask to talk here, and you all have actually covered a lot of thoughts as I've been contemplating them. The importance of the structure is sort of indisputable. It's Ralph Cram. He was a guy, we studied him in school back out on the West Coast. He was, you know, a big name in revival architecture, the English collegiate Gothic architecture. It influences the campuses of Princeton and Rice University and churches up and down the coast here. You know, he kind of created a style, you could say, that we would have a building of his in Somerville is actually somewhat special. And it's outside of the framework. He's most known for his Gothic revival, but he did do Romanesque revival as well. This one is distinct. I can't think of another Romanesque revival building in the city. There must be something, certainly not in the church world. So I think for those reasons, the building is worthy of protection that way. And then I think we have to kind of counterbalance that with some of the arguments that were put forward. We heard a lot of, you know, the angle with what are his views on bigotry or white supremacy and things like that. I concur. I didn't really see anything that seemed really smoking gunnish about that, the word to use. And certainly not to the level where I would consider ruling out protection of a building. And I think the unfortunate reality is we don't have the privilege in this country of having a clean bill of health for all of things that we hold dear, the works of art and literature and architecture. If you go back, not much time at all, pretty much everything's going to be tainted by some, you know, people have their hands in the creation of something that we like, but they weren't themselves individuals that we would support their views in other respects. So to me, that's kind of a big threshold to go and make that the reason for deliberately eliminating a work by someone like Ralph Cram. And I don't think that threshold is met in this case. I just don't. Another topic that was actually brought up a lot tonight was the affordable housing and just the need for housing. And I feel like it's kind of two ships passing the night there, where yes, that's a very real need in the city. There are a lot of opportunities. Thankfully, the city council passed the affordable housing overlay, and there's a lot going on in sites that are getting developed in the city. There are a lot of opportunities to build housing in the city. There are very few buildings of this quality that remain to be protected. So I don't think that it's necessarily a zero-sum game here, where you can only do one or the other. Also, I just want to back up. We got a lot of letters, and some of the letters were really heartfelt. There were page after page of description. I just want to say to the folks who are actually listening that submitted letters, I read them all, and I appreciate, you know, in all views, this. There's some real thought that put into this. And sometimes when you write a letter to the public for something like this, you don't really know what happens to it. Does someone just check off a box and say for or against? But we do read those, so thank you for that. And what were some of the other, I guess the other thing which does cause some heartache is just the, you know, the fact that there is a harsh, I appreciate that the Masons, this is their pot of money here. And I recognize that it's not an easy path to pursue saving, to adaptively reusing this building. I don't get the sense that that's really been seriously considered to this point. You know, there are options, and we haven't really been presented with an analysis of what they've tried to do or haven't tried to do, the costs and things like that. So to me, I think that it's not really it doesn't play that in itself can't be the reason to deny the inclusion in a historic district, the fact that something needs work, because that would rule out a lot of protection that we do to buildings in the area. And I just haven't seen anything that describes this place as being beyond repair, and it's occupiable, as presumably as an occupancy permit. There's churches functioning in there up till fairly recently. So that's my thought on that aspect of it. There are a lot of churches that get adaptive reuse in this city and elsewhere, so that's certainly something that's done. And I think those are really my thoughts. In my opinion, is that this is a property that should be included in a historic district. So I would support that. It's my final thought there. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add or respond to things that have been said here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to add that if something did come up, which was implied at the start of the meeting, that another avenue had been identified, I'd like to imagine that Mr. Barris would have been engaged in that somehow. And if not, then he could be engaged in that going forward, because I'm not sure whether he was or not. And as somebody who has an interest in doing something on the site, and it's somebody who's already invested in the site and understands the reasoning of the Historic Preservation Commission in the city, then I think that he should be engaged if that is the case. I think that would be terribly important. We need good developers in the city. And from everything we've heard, Mr. Barris fits that description. And the other thing I'd like to add is that I believe this is possibly a very good area for affordable housing. And I know that the city invests heavily in affordable housing and in historic preservation. And these are areas where perhaps the two could come together and be of some assistance. And that's something that perhaps Mr. Barris could also pursue with the city. I don't know if he has or hasn't. I'm just suggesting.
Thank you, Mr. Bingham.
Are we?
Anything staff wants to?
I was going to ask that. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to ask apparently the same thing. I just wanted to see if there's anything staff wants to add to the discussion hearing us talk, answers or whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I think staff is all set.
And if no one has anything else to say, then I would move that we endorse the establishment of 125 Highland Avenue as a local historic district.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We'll do a roll call, starting with Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Bingham?
Yes.
Mr. Salvi?
Yes.
And Mr. Shagnon?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well.
And in that case, I move that we submit this proposal or this proposed LHD to City Council for their consideration.
I'll second
I second
that.
it.
Oh. Mr. Bauer.
No,
Seconded by Mr. Bauer.
go ahead, Mr. Bingham.
Mr. Bingham, okay. Okay, so it's all in favor of the motion proposed by Vice Chair Kelly, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, roll call. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Bingham,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
and Mr. Chagnon.
Much more enthusiastically, yes.
And I vote yes as well. So we have it 6-0. And I think that is the one and only thing on our agenda for tonight. Unless anybody has anything else to add, we get a motion that we close the hearing.
I just want to join with others to in thanking all of the people who have turned out tonight to give us their thoughts and the people who have submitted thoughts to us in writing. It is really great to know that people are engaged around these issues, and we really appreciate what you've had to say to us. And I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure this is true for my colleagues who've read everything that has been submitted. So we thank you.
Yes.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Very much so.
Do I submit a motion that we adjourn?
Second on the motion.
Favor of adjourning? Aye.
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 Opposed? A roll call. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Bingham,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Chagnon,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. There we have it, folks. Sorry,
Thank you.
Right.
I guess we still on, or should we, who's going to close out the hearing?
Yes,
person.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. If you have motioned, you are adjourned, and you've done your roll call, then we shall close off the meeting for you.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.